The story kicks off at a massive, sunlit estate. Inside the library, a tiny 5-year-old girl named Lottie accidentally drops a massive book right on her head. Rubbing her sore forehead, she realizes something totally wild. The crazy novel she just read isn't fiction, it's her actual life. The book focuses on Duke Frodium, a guy famously nicknamed the Monster. High society whispers about him constantly, especially since he rarely shows his face at parties. But Duke Damien Frodium is no ugly beast. He's a prestigious master swordsman with some seriously lethal looks. People assume the Monster title is just a huge compliment for his insane skills. They genuinely believe they are just honoring the most formidable guy in the Empire. After all, he seems way too perfect to be just human. But the terrifying truth is that he's a literal demon who used to drown the continent in blood. Then out of nowhere, a child literally falls from the sky. That's how little Lottie magically arrives at the Frodium estate. The second she spots him in the snow, she recognizes him from the story and asks if he's her daddy. He bluntly confirms it. But despite meeting his long-lost kid, Damien looks about as thrilled as a brick wall. With ice-cold eyes, he immediately summons his butler, Bellant. He carelessly orders his staff to give her a room and raise her in the mansion. His only real condition is that they keep her breathing. Lottie just sits there in her oversized chair, taking in his harsh words. She's grateful he took her in, but she definitely wishes he phrased it a bit nicer. Since everyone follows the Duke's orders to a T, she knows she'll only get the bare minimum to survive. Naturally, they shove her in a room as far away from her dad as humanly possible. But honestly, Lottie is totally fine flying under the radar and staying out of his way. Even if her dad neglects her, the mansion maids absolutely lose their minds over how cute she is. They constantly stuff her cheeks with cookies, completely charmed by her sweet little face. The staff is divided, though. Some secretly pity her and assume she'll just be adopted out to another family. But while the older maids bicker and gossip, Lottie just peacefully enjoys the attention. She flashes them an adorable wave goodbye. Still, she knows there's one terrifying person in the house who hates that she exists. Suddenly, Lottie sits up in bed, realizing mealtime is completely over. She usually eats in her room to avoid her dad, but today her food never showed up. She pouts, trying to figure out which maid completely dropped the ball on her lunch. Remembering that the slacking maid was already goofing off earlier, Lottie gets fired up. Her tiny stomach unleashes a ferocious growl, demanding food immediately. Taking matters into her own hands, she sneaks out to raid the kitchen herself. She didn't want to bother the other maids, unsure if their kindness was genuine or just part of their job. Her little feet patter down the grand hallway as she hustles for a snack. But when she peeks around a corner, she completely freezes. Standing right there is the monster Duke himself, her dad. She instantly remembers that this guy isn't just a tough noble, but an actual creature of darkness. He's the main villain of a horror story who absolutely loves crushing people like bugs. Shaking in her boots, she realizes that being completely ignored by him is actually a massive blessing. Suddenly, Damien turns his head, and Lottie dips out of sight just in the nick of time. A maid catches her hiding and asks what she's doing, completely brushing off Lottie's hungry pleas. The mean maid flat out lies, saying there's no food left, leaving Lottie super confused. Thankfully, a nicer maid steps in and scolds the other one for bullying a toddler. She hands Lottie a piece of bread, which the little girl happily snatches up like a 5-star meal. Sitting quietly on a chair with her snack, Lottie knows she just has to keep her head down. She doesn't plan on staying in this terrifying house forever, but until she's older, she has to play it safe. Lottie realizes she still needs an adult to take care of her because surviving alone in a massive mansion is practically impossible. She shivers at the thought of monsters hiding under her bed, but then figures her demon dad is basically the scariest thing around, and at least he doesn't harass her. Pumping her tiny fists, she decides to just lay low, stay quiet, and eventually become completely independent. Later, she sprints down the hallway like a tiny tornado, completely ignoring the maid telling her to slow down. Even though she lives under the same roof as her dad, they literally never speak to each other. But she's totally fine with that, knowing it's way safer to fly under a demon's radar. Since he doesn't pay any attention to her, Lottie basically has free reign to roam the entire estate. Pacing the grand halls, she wonders where she should explore next. Suddenly, she notices a set of giant pink doors that are usually locked tight, but today they're slightly cracked open. Seeing the opening, her curiosity completely takes over. Peeking through the gap, she decides not to let this golden opportunity slip away. Pushing the heavy door, Lottie sneaks right into her terrifying father's personal study. She looks around the massive bookshelves but quickly starts sulking, realizing there aren't any picture books for her to read. Just as she decides to leave, she trips and absolutely eats dirt, bumping her head on a stray book. Annoyed that her dad's room is a mess, she picks up the book and notices the cover is completely blank. Figuring she can't read the complicated adult words anyway, she decides to take a quick peek just for fun. Opening it up, she finds a blank page and wonders if it's just an empty notebook. But as she flips further, she suddenly spots some handwriting. The text reads like a story, making her super curious to see where it goes. It describes a violent, adopted daughter of the Duke, but as Lottie reads the character's name, she freezes. It's her. Suddenly, her memories of the original novel come rushing back, completely blowing her mind. The story was about a beautiful, emotionless girl who eventually learns how to love, but only after becoming Duke Damien Frodium's foster daughter. Lottie realizes that the heroine's situation is exactly like hers, except Lottie is his actual flesh and blood. She remembers a specific scene where the heroine hesitantly asks the Duke about a forbidden room. In the flashback, the Duke surprisingly allows the girl to ask her question. He explains with a deadpan expression that the room belonged to his biological daughter, who passed away quietly from a mysterious illness. He then firmly warns the heroine to never enter that room under any circumstances. Snapping back to reality, Lottie realizes the horrifying truth. She is that hidden daughter fated to croak at age 10. Panicking, she wonders if she's going to annoy her villainous dad into getting rid of her even faster. Holding the mysterious book, she tries to figure out what to do with such an important clue. But suddenly, a voice echoes from behind, questioning if the book is actually important. Damien stands there looking down at her, casually mentioning he'd never leave top-secret intel just lying around. Lottie sweats nervously, thinking that his private study is exactly where important things belong. Startled, she whips her head around to face him. She stares up with huge eyes, wondering why he's just watching her in absolute silence. To her absolute shock, the monster Duke gives her a tiny, subtle smirk. Flustered and terrified, Lottie quickly backs up, realizing she's standing way too close to the final boss. Later in her room, she tries to mentally organize everything she just read before she forgets. She tells her maid, Veronica, that she's going to play in her blanket fort and orders her not to step on it. But just as she gets cozy, her stomach unleashes a growl so loud it sounds like a dying lawnmower. Veronica gently suggests she go to the dining room, and Lottie realizes this means she might get to eat without her scary dad around. Excited to inhale some food in peace, she hops off the bed and happily agrees. But when she waltzes into the grand dining room, she stops dead in her tracks. Her dad is already sitting there. The elegant dining space suddenly feels like a total trap. She totally thought she was going to have a relaxing solo meal. Remembering how hungry she is, she decides she'll just grab a quick bite and then retreat back to her room. But seeing him sitting there quietly, she can't help but wonder why the busiest guy in the empire is chilling at the dinner table so early. Climbing into her oversized chair miles away from him, she instantly regrets leaving her cozy room. Breaking the silence, Damien asks why she actually showed up early for once. She nervously points out that she was just hungry and asks why he isn't working, prompting him to drop a massive bombshell. He came early specifically to eat with her. Damien looks down at her with surprisingly soft eyes, acknowledging that she must be absolutely starving. Lottie nods, rubbing her little cheek, and innocently asks when the food will finally be served. It turns out the kitchen is running a little slower than usual today. But Damien casually mentions they're just early and asks what she's been up to right as a massive feast arrives. Grabbing her utensils, Lottie struggles to slice through her meat, super frustrated that it won't cut. She internally groans, wishing she could just tear into it with her bare hands like she does in her room. Suddenly, her knife slips right out of her tiny grip. The blade flies and actually nicks Damien's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. Lottie instantly remembers the terrifying rumors about him being a literal demon who feels zero pain. People always say he's a cold-blooded monster who wouldn't even flinch if he got stabbed. But seeing him bleed, Lottie panics, knowing it must still sting. Flailing in a total panic, she accidentally slips off her massive chair and plummets toward the floor. Out of nowhere, Damien catches her midair, holding her securely against his chest. The grand dining room falls completely silent. Lottie realizes she's perfectly fine, but she immediately stresses out over her dad's bleeding face. Gathering her courage, she stares up at the terrifying Duke and instantly apologizes for hurting him. Damien just blinks down at her, completely dumbfounded by her reaction. He lets out a soft sigh, gently patting her head, and admits he was only worried about her getting hurt from the fall. Lottie's eyes go wide as she realizes the monster Duke isn't mad at all, he actually cares. Because of his icy welcome, she spent this whole time thinking he absolutely hated her guts. But in this moment, none of that matters, she just wants to fix his scratch. Her mind flashes back to a warm memory of her real mother taking care of her. Back then, Lottie was sick in bed with a nasty fever. Her mom sat by her side, gently comforting her as she cried. To cheer her up, her mom offered to use a special magic spell to make the pain disappear. Channeling that exact memory, Lottie reaches up and gently taps Damien's cheek, chanting her mom's magic healing words. For a second, Damien just freezes, not saying a single word. Lottie starts to sweat, wondering if her toddler magic totally fizzled out. But then Damien cracks a genuinely warm smile, touching his cheek and telling her the pain is completely gone. Lottie's eyes sparkle like stars, absolutely hyped that she might be a secret wizard. She flashes him a massive, toothy grin, deciding to just enjoy the moment instead of overthinking it. As they go back to eating, the heavy tension in the room completely vanishes. Damien rests his chin on his hand, casually commenting on her impressive appetite. He watches in amusement as she absolutely demolishes a massive plate of steak and potatoes. Lottie happily chews, figuring that if she doesn't eat well, her scary dad might actually get mad. Damien just watches her with a curious, unreadable expression. Later on, Lottie notices that her personal maid treats her with a weird sense of pity. Even though Lottie is literally the Duke's daughter, the staff constantly acts like she's a poor street orphan. But Lottie completely flips the switch, deciding she is done taking pity from anyone in this house. Meanwhile, two maids are whispering in the hall, caught off guard by Lottie suddenly standing there. One of them laughs it off, claiming Lottie is just a clueless kid who doesn't even know how to act like a real noble. Hearing them talk trash right in front of her, Lottie hits them with an absolute death glare. She knows they're disregarding her, but she genuinely didn't want to use her dad's terrifying reputation to flex on them. Stepping up, she coldly tells the maids to drop the fake pity and just act how they did before. As she turns away, her mind races back to the messed up situation she's trapped in. She remembers the last words her mother ever told her, which makes trusting her new dad super complicated. Deep down, a nagging doubt starts creeping into her head. If Damien really wants to pretend she doesn't exist, why did he even bring her to this massive estate? She peers into the room, wondering if the monster Duke actually accepts her as his real daughter. But shaking her head, she realizes she should just be grateful she isn't surviving on the streets. Damien sits back in his chair, wondering if Lottie seriously believes she isn't his biological daughter. Later on, they pull up to a massive, incredibly fancy boutique in town. The tailor keeps calling Lottie a baby, which totally annoys her, so she demands her dad scold him. Unfazed, the tailor promises to pull out all the stops to find the perfect fit for the little lady. Damien just hugs her tight, completely ignoring the fashion talk and demanding something comfortable above all else. Lottie is amazed when she realizes these high-end clothes literally have comfort magic woven right into the fabric. The tailor then dramatically reveals a massive wardrobe absolutely stuffed with gorgeous dresses. She tries on outfit after outfit, looking so incredibly cute that everyone in the room basically melts. The staff fawns over her, completely forgetting that this little angel is actually the daughter of a terrifying demon. But the endless fashion show completely drains her, so she shoots her dad a desperate telepathic SOS. Catching the hint, Damien mercifully calls it off, instantly earning him some major dad points. When the tailor asks which dress they want, Damien absolutely flexes and buys every single one she tried on. By the time they get home, Lottie is completely out cold, so the butler quietly suggests letting her sleep in her new clothes. Meanwhile, far away, a shadowy figure realizes a new child has entered the Frodium mansion. A mysterious boy senses a dark energy shift and realizes his terrifying dad suddenly has a new daughter. Staring out his window, he decides he needs to head home and check this out for himself. Back at the estate, Bellant the butler steps into the office to deliver some major news. He casually informs the Duke that the young master is heading back to the mansion. Damien is totally caught off guard, having absolutely no clue his son was returning. Bellant insists the boy definitely sent a letter, so they start digging around the office. They both stare down at a literal mountain of unopened mail piled high on Damien's desk. Sure enough, Bellant plucks the exact letter right out of the chaotic mess. Damien reads it but quickly asks how Bellant even knew he was coming if the letter was buried. Bellant completely deadpans that the young master contacted him directly because he knew Damien wouldn't bother reading his mail. Damien sighs, realizing his son knows his bad habits way too well. He rests his chin on his hand, genuinely wondering if the kid already knows about Lottie. The conversation shifts to a few days ago when Lottie was throwing a total fit about her maid, Veronica. She looked absolutely terrified that day, acting completely out of character. Tapping his finger on the desk, Damien confirms he remembers the weird incident perfectly. Bellant finally drops the tea, explaining exactly what caused her sudden panic. It turns out Lottie had accidentally overheard some nasty maids gossiping in the hallway. They were spreading vicious rumors that she wasn't his real kid and would definitely be abandoned, instantly darkening Damien's eyes. With an icy glare, he immediately orders Bellant to handle the trashy staff. Damien admits he only kept his distance so she wouldn't be scared of him, totally unaware of the toxic rumors festering in the house. He decides it's time to completely crush the gossip and formally introduce her as a true Freudium. To fix the mess, he decides to use the public's love for dramatic gossip right back against them. Almost overnight, a wild rumor spreads that the Duke had a secret lover who tragically left him, and now he fiercely protects their hidden daughter. Before long, the crazy, romanticized story reaches all the way to the capital, making Lottie untouchable. Meanwhile, Lottie is busy sneaking around the mansion and stops right outside her dad's massive bedroom. Knowing he's usually stuck in his office at this hour, she confidently decides to snoop inside. She stares up at the insanely fancy doors, thinking it doesn't even look like a room a normal human would sleep in. Then again, her dad is basically a demon, so she pushes the heavy door open anyway. Inside, she spots a massive, intimidating portrait of Damien staring blankly at the room. Remembering how the maids constantly thirst over him, she wonders if he's actually considered handsome. Looking at the larger family portrait, she notices he's the only one who really stands out from the rest. With his dark black hair and red eyes, she realizes they actually look super similar. She tilts her head, wondering if she'd look exactly like him if she were a boy. Suddenly, a deep voice says daughter right behind her. Lottie's heart practically jumps out of her chest, absolutely terrified by his ninja stealth skills. Damien chuckles, casually saying her little snooping adventure looks fun, while Lottie just trembles in pure, angry panic. Caught red-handed sneaking into his room, Lottie freezes and slowly tries to moonwalk right back out. But Damien spots her instantly. Looking completely unbothered, he calmly asks if it looks like he's actually mad at her. He gently waves her inside, telling her not to just stand awkwardly in the doorway forever. Lottie nervously waddles over to the couch, stammering that she actually had absolutely no reason to come. Damien raises an eyebrow, asking if she really needs a special reason to see her own dad. He totally shocks her by declaring that there isn't a single room in the entire estate she can't enter. Lottie gasps, her tiny mind blown that she basically has a VIP pass to the whole mansion. Still, considering his villainous reputation, she secretly wonders if he's just being sarcastic. Suddenly, a sharp knock interrupts them. Bellant the butler walks in, his face practically beaming when he realizes his favorite little lady is hanging out. Carrying a silver platter, Bellant notes that it makes total sense why the Duke randomly ordered sweet refreshments. Uncovering a gorgeous cake, Bellant praises his master for thinking of the little lady, though Lottie still completely hates being called little. Damien casually brushes off Bellant's teasing and tells Lottie to dig in. Lottie scoops up some pudding and holds it out, bravely telling her terrifying dad to say ah. But Damien just sits there in silence, making Lottie wonder who else she'd be talking to while Bellant awkwardly third wheels in the background. Her tiny arm starts getting sore, and she gets super confused as to why her dad isn't opening his mouth for a bite. Innocently, Lottie turns to Bellant and asks if demons just can't eat desserts. Bellant absolutely loses his mind, screaming in shock that the toddler knows her dad is a literal creature of darkness. Damien immediately hits his butler with a lethal death glare, making Bellant sweat bullets and instantly apologize. Damien then turns his attention back to Lottie, curiously asking how she knows so much about demon lore. Excited to show off, Lottie proudly recites that demons are beings completely lacking blood and tears. Damien leans in closely and admits she's absolutely spot on. Cheekily resting her face on her hand, Lottie asks if she should exclude her daddy from that terrifying description. Bellant desperately waves his arms in the background, begging to be excluded from the monster category too, making Lottie giggle. Inwardly, Lottie realizes her knowledge is super limited since the book barely focused on Damien's true identity. Looking down at her fondly, Damien asks if she wants to learn more about his true nature. Lottie eagerly nods, but Bellant absolutely freaks out, slapping his hands over her ears to protect her innocence. The dramatic butler yells that his precious lady should only hear good things. But Lottie sweetly pulls his hands away, declaring that her dad and Bellant aren't bad guys, they're her family. Damien softens, admitting there really isn't much more to tell her anyway. He does drop a spooky fun fact, casually mentioning that demons are aggressive creatures who literally drink blood, sending a shiver right down Lottie's spine. Bellant snaps again, yelling at his master to stop giving the toddler nightmare fuel. He reminds Damien that the only demons she'll ever meet are the ones right here on the estate. Lottie tilts her head, super confused by what the butler means. Bellant glares at Damien, scolding him for casually dropping demon lore like it's a bedtime story. He argues that normal humans go their entire lives completely oblivious to this dark reality. Lottie starts to pout, her mood totally tanking as she misinterprets his words to mean she's going to die young. Realizing she's upset, Damien gently watches her, having skipped his office work just to spend quiet time with her in his room. Lottie glances at the old family portrait, wondering about the mysterious kids in the painting. Knowing her dad has all the answers, she hops right over to him. She patters up to Damien as he sits by his ornate desk. Grabbing his sleeve, she demands to satisfy her burning curiosity. Instead of just answering, Damien gently takes her tiny hand and tells her to follow him. As he holds her close, he explains that humans create families through romantic love, but demons rarely experience that kind of emotion. He reveals that because the previous Duke of Frodium had no heirs, an elderly man from the family approached the ageless demon. In a flashback, the frail old man casually remarks that Damien hasn't aged a day, before asking him a massive favor. Damien explains to Lottie that he took on the Frodium name, but as an immortal being, he'll eventually have to pass the title down to a human heir so the legacy survives. Hearing the deep warmth in his voice, Lottie feels completely moved by how much he treasures his adopted family. She smiles up at him, realizing that the terrifying monster Duke actually has the most gentle human heart imaginable. Looking down at her dad, Lottie realizes he must actually have a ton of love for the Frodium family. Meanwhile, a mysterious boy silently watches her from the stairs. The next morning, Lottie wakes up rubbing her sleepy eyes, noticing the mansion is unusually loud. She sits straight up in bed and excitedly tells Veronica about the juicy gossip she overheard yesterday. She recounts the wildly dramatic rumor about her dad having a secret lover and a hidden daughter he cherishes. She giggles, thinking people make up the craziest romantic stories, completely clueless that the rumor is actually about her. She then curiously asks what happened to those mean maids who were talking trash last time. The scene flashes to Damien's absolutely terrifying, shadowy glare, hinting they met a very dark fate. But wanting to keep Lottie's innocence intact, Veronica sweetly lies and says they were just sent back to their hometowns. Moving on, Lottie points out how noisy the estate is today. Veronica explains that the staff is super busy scrubbing a room spotless, making Lottie wonder why they don't just use a guest room. Veronica looks totally flustered, realizing nobody actually told the little lady what's going on. When Lottie asks if a visitor is coming, Veronica nervously debates if she should just admit it's her older brother. Instead, she stammers that the lady is coming, leaving Lottie completely confused since she is the lady of the house. Suddenly it clicks she has a brother, her jaw practically hits the floor. Without a second thought, she leaps out of bed and absolutely bolts for the door. She dashes out into the grand hallway like a tiny rocket, leaving Veronica shouting after her. She sprints in a total panic, completely freaking out because the original novel never mentioned a sibling. She skids to a halt right in front of Bellant and a gray-haired boy she's literally never seen before. Lottie internally hyperventilates, thinking this plot twist is totally off script. When a worried Veronica catches up, Lottie notices the boy staring and asks if they're close. Veronica flashes a bright smile, admitting they've known each other for a really long time. Even though it makes perfect sense, Lottie can't help feeling a tiny bit jealous. Needing an escape, she reaches out and randomly demands to go play outside for some fresh air. The boy immediately offers to escort her, but she coldly shoots him down, saying she wants to fly solo today. Out in the hall, she quietly grumbles about bumping into him the exact second she stepped out of her room. Spinning around on her heels, she decides she just wants to retreat back to her safe space. But the boy casually reaches out, twirling a strand of her dark hair and calling it weird. Lottie hits him with an epic death glare, totally baffled by his sudden attitude. He hits back, flat out telling her that she completely clashes with their father's tastes. He smugly claims the Duke strictly prefers bright hair over dark hair, leaving Lottie super confused. He adds that Dad also likes blue eyes over red ones, basically implying she doesn't belong here. Deciding this kid is a total weirdo, Lottie flat out refuses to talk to him and storms off, while he just drops a salty whatever. Watching her leave, the boy thinks she looks totally useless, annoyed that his father even bothered taking her in. In a flashback, he points a finger, rambling about being useful to the family, but Lottie already knows she doesn't need a special reason to be there. Pointing right back, she cleverly guesses that he must be here for a specific reason then. He crosses his arm like a snob, confidently agreeing. He proudly declares that he is special. But to Lottie, his arrogant words basically translate to, "I'm way better than some random kid picked up off the streets." Later, the boy steps into his personal bedroom, pleased to see it hasn't changed a bit. He runs a finger over a thick book, absolutely thrilled that his strict warning to Bellant kept the place perfectly dust-free. He drops onto his lavish couch like a sack of potatoes, convinced he was totally right to put Lottie in her place. He thinks about how his father is always hyper-focused on running the empire, leaving him to handle all the complicated magic duties. But lately, his workload has skyrocketed into a massive, terrifying mountain of paperwork. Freaking out that his dad might be in trouble, the boy actually cast a secret magic spell to spy on the estate. That's when his magic radar picked up a totally new presence the Duke had taken in a strange child. He sighs heavily, annoyed that his dad dumped a ton of work on him just to babysit some random girl. Slamming his hands on his desk, he still can't believe what he's dealing with. He watches Lottie marching down the hall, wondering where the heck she's rushing off to. Seeing her head straight for the main entrance, he wonders if she's actually trying to run away after their little showdown. He turns away, determined to protect his spot in the Frodium family, but questions if she's really fragile enough to quit this easily. Suddenly, he completely flops onto the floor, realizing her grand escape is a total joke since the front gates are locked tight anyway. Behan sits in his room, suddenly realizing he left the terrace door wide open. He gazes outside, quietly wondering if Lottie has returned yet. Trying to act like he doesn't care, he shuts the door, telling himself it's none of his concern. He starts to walk away, but the thought of her getting soaked in the freezing rain nags at him. He tries to brush it off, reasoning that she's their father's favorite and doesn't need his pity. He absolutely flops onto the couch, convincing himself a little rain won't kill her, until it hits him that she's a fragile human, so she might actually die from a cold. Meanwhile, Lottie is sitting outside, getting absolutely drenched in the downpour. She realizes she only stormed out because she was too small to fight Behan, but now she's heavily debating going back just to smack him once. She remembers wandering deep into the massive garden before the storm hit. When the freezing raindrops started falling, she was completely caught off guard. With the mansion way too far away, she scrambled to find any shelter she could. Now she huddles under a large tree, shivering as it becomes obvious the rain isn't stopping anytime soon. She stares out at the gloomy estate, wondering how long she'll be stuck out here alone. The thought of having to face that snobby kid again when she finally returns makes her dread going back. Slumping down in the dirt, she feels totally isolated and completely gutted, praying for the rain to stop. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out from above. She looks up to see Behan, who actually came out in the storm to find her. Without a word, he drops his dry jacket over her shivering shoulders. He notices she isn't completely soaked to the bone. He lets out a sigh of relief, knowing it would be a massive disaster if their dad's favorite human croaked on his watch. Once the sky clears up, he tells her it's time to head back inside. As they walk, Lottie struggles to keep pace, annoyed that his little legs are moving at warp speed and demands he slow down. Surprisingly, he actually stops and waits for her to catch up. Peeking at his back, Lottie realizes his shirt is completely soaked from braving the storm for her. Touched by the gesture, she innocently asks if he actually likes her, but he instantly snaps back that he hates her, totally killing the mood. Lottie instantly goes from grateful to intensely annoyed. Behan looks genuinely upset, demanding to know why everything comes so easily to her, but before they can argue, a maid spots them. Veronica rushes over, absolutely horrified to find the kids soaking wet. She gently scolds Lottie for not running back the second the rain started, and Lottie meekly apologizes. Behan turns to leave, quietly telling Lottie to go to sleep early so she doesn't catch a cold. Lottie grips his oversized jacket, realizing he must be freezing without it. Later that night, Lottie wakes up completely confused, wandering the dark mansion. Realizing she's in the main hallway, she decides she should just head back to bed. But as she turns, she spots a light spilling out from one of the grand rooms. She quietly peeks around the corner, wondering who is still awake at this crazy hour. Recognizing her dad and Behan's voices, she immediately wonders if they're gossiping about her. Her mind suddenly spirals back to the despair of realizing she was a book's villainess, hating how her hard work always meant nothing. She grips the fabric over her chest, feeling that old, familiar pain creeping back in. She remembers Behan's cruel insult, telling her to go play house in her hometown. Just the phrase playhouse echoes in her head, making her feel like a total imposter. She tries to reassure herself that her dad doesn't actually see her as a fake daughter. But her insecurities completely take over. Being treated like an outsider playing a game feels like a massive slap in the face. And hearing Behan explicitly tell her he hated her was the final straw. Tears stream down her face as her dad steps out into the hall, and she instantly sobs that she hates him. She cries that he promised her a safe place to return to, but she feels like a rolling stone with nowhere to go. Damien looks down at her with gentle concern, asking why she's suddenly saying she hates him. Gripping her dress, she breaks down, crying that nobody in this family actually welcomes her. Damien's eyes darken. He scoops her into a tight, comforting hug and tells her to stop crying. Carrying her up the grand staircase, protective dad mode is fully activated as he dangerously demands to know exactly who dared to tell his daughter she isn't welcome. Lottie looks up at Damien, realizing her clash with Bihan is just a huge misunderstanding. Damien gently tells her to completely ignore the boy, leaving Lottie totally confused. Annoyed that this drama is happening under his roof, Damien decides to clear the air once and for all. He drops an absolute bombshell, casually revealing that Bihan isn't his son and isn't even adopted. Lottie's jaw practically hits the floor in pure shock. Later, she paces the library, her tiny mind racing to process this crazy plot twist. Even if they aren't actually related, she can't just stop thinking about him. She realizes that completely avoiding him is impossible unless one of them packs up and leaves the estate. Glancing around, Lottie wonders where Veronica is, realizing her favorite maid has been MIA all morning. Hearing footsteps, she spins around, fully expecting Veronica to walk through the door. But instead, Bihan steps into the room, totally catching her off guard. She stares at him like he grew a second head, wondering what he's doing in her space. A flashback reveals Veronica explaining to Bihan that Lottie is Damien's actual biological daughter. Bihan had been completely clueless, assuming Lottie was just another candidate taken in by the Duke like him. He realizes why the staff is buzzing. A demon having a biological child is basically unheard of. Usually, demons just adopt talented noble kids to train and eventually pass their insane powers down to them. Since he and Veronica were the chosen ones, Bihan admits he felt threatened by some random kid suddenly taking his spot. But he realizes he never actually meant to be jealous of a helpless little girl. Biting his nail, he enters full panic mode, knowing he totally messed up their relationship. Back in the present, Bihan bravely pushes open the door to face the music. Lottie just stares at him, waiting to see what his next move is. He fidgets nervously before formally asking for permission to enter her room. Realizing he finally knows the truth, Lottie softens and politely thanks him. Still, she wonders why he's hovering around now that the air is cleared. Without hesitating, Bihan drops into a deep, formal bow, completely owning his mistake and apologizing for everything. Totally flustered by the dramatic apology, Lottie immediately begs him to stand up, assuring him she's not mad. She admits to herself that she's a total sucker for apologies, especially since he rescued her in the freezing rain. Bihan flashes a soft, relieved smile, explaining he just wanted her forgiveness before he leaves the estate. Lottie is absolutely stunned, demanding to know why he's leaving when he just got back. He calmly explains that Damien ordered him away, adding that he only acts as the Duke's son to be useful in the future. Realizing he already packed his bags, Lottie throws a tiny tantrum, heartbroken that her brother is bailing on her. Flashing back to her dad, she remembers Damien explaining that Bihan had essential duties to finish and was only stopping by. Damien pointed out they didn't even get along, so why would she care? Sweating nervously, Lottie desperately tried to explain that they had actually made up. Back in the present, she slumps in her chair, wondering if Bihan just secretly hated the idea of being her brother. Out of nowhere, a familiar voice declares that's completely false, and Bihan steps out of a dark portal. Lottie practically jumps out of her skin, terrified of the shadowy demon familiar trailing behind him. But the shadow creature happily purrs that it likes Damien's daughter, so Lottie bravely asks it to deliver a message to Bihan. She doesn't even need to because Bihan steps fully into the light, announcing he's back for good. He proudly explains he kept his promise to be her brother. He just had to leave temporarily to dump all his workload on someone else. Lottie realizes her dad completely left out that crucial detail, making her stress for nothing. Bihan looks around the massive garden, asking why she's wandering out here all alone. Lottie mischievously smiles, asking if he can use his magic to help her cheat at hide-and-seek with Veronica. Bihan absolutely cracks up, his sudden laughter catching Lottie completely off guard. He gently explains that using magic here is basically impossible for him right now. He tells her the estate's magical barrier severely weakens outside spells, proving that real demons aren't just all-powerful villains like in the storybooks. As time passes, Lottie realizes Bihan has fully settled into life at the mansion now that his work is gone. In fact, he practically lives in her room, visiting her every single day. He constantly checks in on her, hyping up her drawings and treating her like absolute royalty. Popping his head through the door with some fancy tea, he secures his spot as the ultimate older brother, leaving Lottie totally thrilled. With the air finally cleared, Bihan officially stays at the estate as the young master of the Frodium family. Lottie is absolutely thrilled, realizing she can finally toss that stressful original novel right out the window. The story wasn't just about her family or the main character, it was about terrifying demons invading the world. But brushing off the heavy thoughts, she decides to just stop stressing and live in the moment. As they sip tea, Behan casually brings up cambions, which are half-human, half-demon hybrids. He explains that cambions struggle to suppress their powers, which usually leads them to lose control and go on a tyrant rampage, before casually adding that he is one. Lottie gasps in pure panic, instantly worrying if she's going to lose control and explode too. But Behan reassures her she's perfectly fine since she doesn't have a single drop of magic, causing Lottie to sigh in massive relief. She realizes that even without any cool powers or being a real demon, her family still totally accepts her. She double-checks with Behan to make sure they're still family, and he firmly promises he'll always be her brother. Hearing him validate her place in the mansion absolutely melts her heart. At first, Lottie just used the book's plot as a survival guide to live quietly. But now, staring out at the beautiful estate, she knows she truly wants to stay with her Frodium family forever. She beams with pure joy, fully accepting that this place is finally her real home. Meanwhile, Damien wraps up a super boring meeting with the local nobles. Since stepping up as a dad, he's actually taken charge of organizing agendas and handling proper reports. Behan slams down a stack of papers, boldly suggesting they just ditch work for the day. Damien ignores the slacking and orders him to summarize the reports, while his aides whisper about how early the meetings have been ending lately. They gossip that the terrifying monster Duke is rushing home to see his precious little princess, plotting to use this soft spot to suck up to him. One overly confident noble tries to relate, laughing and mentioning that he also has a daughter the exact same age. He assumes Damien is in a huge hurry to get back to his kid. But Damien's eyes instantly go pitch black as he coldly tells the guy not to hold him hostage if he already knows the deal. Suddenly, Damien pauses, wondering if this guy actually has some decent parenting advice to share. He gives the noble a chance, but the guy just starts completely oversharing about his own kid. Damien stands there frozen as the guy dumps a massive pile of useless TMI about his daughter acting cute. Realizing this was a total waste of time, Damien bluntly asks if the story was even supposed to be cute, leaving the noble completely shook. Without waiting for an answer, Damien just turns on his heel and completely ditches the awkward conversation. He walks away feeling genuinely annoyed that someone would dare waste his precious dad time. Back at the estate, Behan notices Damien returning way earlier than expected. He asks if something happened, but Damien grumbles that it was nothing, clearly looking super irritated. Behan raises an eyebrow, knowing the Duke almost never lets his emotions show like this. Damien crosses his arms and straight up admits he refuses to waste any more time working when he could be seeing his daughter. The two quickly agree to ditch the office and head straight to the garden. An aide tries to stop them, panicking about the unfinished work. But Damien just hits him with a cold stare, stating he never actually asked for an opinion before shutting the door in his face. Out in the garden, Veronica calls out for her little lady. Lottie pops out from behind the flowers like a tiny jack-in-the-box, looking so adorable that Veronica practically squeals. Lottie flashes a massive grin, throwing her arms up and telling Veronica she looks super pretty today too. Behan walks up with a soft smile, gently warning Lottie not to trip in her fancy new dress. He notices her adorable new shoes, and Lottie proudly brags that the boutique owner gifted them to her during her shopping spree. Behan's eyes go wide, totally shocked that she actually went out on the town with their terrifying dad. The three of them sit down for a fancy tea party, and Lottie excitedly mentions the delicious treat she ate in the city. She taps her chin, totally forgetting the actual name of the dessert. But then her face lights up as she remembers it was incredibly cold and super sweet. Veronica chuckles at how adorable she is, instantly realizing what the mystery dessert is. Behan offers to have the chef whip it up, but Veronica quickly volunteers to go fetch it herself. As Veronica leaves, Lottie notices a super awkward vibe hanging in the air. She stares at Behan and bluntly asks if he secretly has a hard time dealing with the head maid. Behan awkwardly admits it's pretty obvious, since Veronica has been at the estate way longer than him. Pushing her little face closer, Lottie shares how lonely she was before arriving, demanding Behan finally spill the tea on how he ended up joining the Frodium family. Behan explains that at first, he had a totally different reason for coming to the estate. He actually joined the Frodium family to track down his mysterious savior. Lottie asks what the guy looked like, and Behan admits his memory is super blurry, only recalling a kid with black hair and red eyes. He never ended up finding the guy, but he's completely satisfied now because he finally found a real family. Suddenly, Damien's imposing footsteps echo behind them as he asks if he's missing out on a fun chat. Before things get awkward, Veronica happily announces she's back. She sets down a massive bowl of the cold, sweet ice cream Lottie was craving earlier. Lottie takes a bite and absolutely lights up, grinning from ear to ear at the delicious taste. After her snack, the warm breeze hits, making her feel super sleepy. Veronica notices her nodding off and gently suggests heading back inside. But Lottie stubbornly refuses, not wanting to waste such a beautiful afternoon. She insists on staying out to enjoy the perfect weather. Yawning, she decides to just lean back on the garden bench for a quick second. Veronica smiles, realizing the poor kid completely skipped her nap and spent the entire morning running around like a maniac. The staff softly agrees to let her sleep right there among the roses. Sometime later, Lottie blinks awake, completely disoriented. But as her vision clears, she spots something totally unexpected. Damien is casually kneeling right in front of her bench. Looking slightly embarrassed, he admits he came out to give his sleeping daughter a piggyback ride inside. Lottie hops down and asks if Veronica called him, but the maid frantically shakes her head no. Super suspicious, Lottie bluntly asks her dad why he's actually here. Trying to play it cool, Damien claims he just happened to spot her from his office window. Lottie squints at him, wondering why he's acting so defensive. She calls his bluff, pointing out that he has a mountain of garden work to do. Damien instantly gets flustered, defensively insisting he's still the busiest man in the entire empire. She tilts her head, playfully asking if he just got bored and missed her. Bellant chuckles, teasing that the Duke ditched his insane schedule just to hang out with his little princess. Veronica quickly shushes the butler, while Damien awkwardly tries to deny that he's desperately trying to win affection points. But seeing how far her dad goes to impress her these days, Lottie completely sees through his tough guy act. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she decides to tease him for being in absolute denial. She giggles and announces she's totally onto his little games, making the staff snicker in the background. Damien slaps a hand over his face in pure embarrassment, while Bihan and Veronica fail to hide their laughs. He gently tugs her dress, asking if she's really going to make fun of her poor dad like this. Dropping the tough act, he basically admits he just wanted an excuse to be close to her. Lottie softens and offers to take a walk with him so he can finally raise his dad ranking. The aides joke that Veronica is still securely holding that #1 spot, though. Damien chuckles and easily scoops Lottie right up into his arms. She happily wraps her arms around his neck, declaring she'll have to work super hard to hit first place herself. In a cute flashback, Lottie remembers the peaceful moments she's spent bonding with her found family. She tells Damien she's determined to be the top priority in his heart. Veronica jokingly accuses Damien of cheating by using his physical strength to win her over. Damien just laughs, plucking a beautiful red rose from the trellis. Bihan slyly steps up, asking if he should offer Lottie a little bribe to win her favor. Damien instantly goes into jealous dad mode, arguing that Bihan can't use his garden flowers as a bribe. But Bihan hands it over anyway, and Lottie happily accepts the sweet gift. Refusing to be outdone, Damien announces he'll throw her an epic birthday party and asks when her special day is. The whole staff gets instantly hyped, volunteering to start prepping the ultimate celebration immediately. But Lottie taps her chin, realizing she actually has no clue when her real birthday is. Her biological mom used to just blindly celebrate it the day before some random date. Looking down at her dad, Lottie smiles and declares her new birthday is the exact day she fell into the Frodium estate, and Damien warmly promises to make it unforgettable. Lottie looks up at her dad, realizing that if he's always by her side, every single day will feel like her birthday. Damien proudly declares that's exactly how it's gonna be. Fast forward a bit, the sweltering summer heat finally passes. Autumn rolls in, turning all the leaves in the estate's massive garden a brilliant, vibrant red. Veronica warmly asks if this is the little lady's first time experiencing the fall season. Lottie nods, explaining she used to live in a freezing forest where it literally snowed every single day, so summer was way too hot for her. Veronica giggles and warns her winter is right around the corner, making Lottie cry out that she only wants spring and autumn. Changing the subject, Veronica asks what she wants for her upcoming birthday, leaving Lottie a little confused about the timeline. Veronica teases that they need to plan ahead before she forgets, prompting Lottie to think really hard. After contemplating for a second, she admits she honestly has no clue. Veronica gently pivots, asking what she wants to do the most right now instead. Without hesitating, Lottie declares she just wants to do fun stuff with her family. She happily lists off taking a real family portrait or going on a sweet picnic together. Veronica smiles, perfectly picturing how quickly the Duke would drop everything for his little lady's request. Lottie then turns the question around, asking what Veronica wants. The head maid nervously admits she just hopes her workload doesn't spike while the Duke is away on business. Lottie innocently asks what if it increased just a little bit so they could spend more time together, but Veronica is absolutely not having it. Lottie sweetens the deal, telling Veronica that she's a super important part of her family too, completely catching the maid off guard. Hearing that strikes a deep chord with Veronica, who actually grew up in a wildly wealthy underworld family. But wealth didn't equal peace. Flashbacks show she was an absolute beast who completely wrecked anyone in her way. To her, family just meant a bunch of backstabbers waiting to strike, so she eventually got sick of the toxic environment and bylaid. But standing in the Frodium estate, her dark view on family is slowly shifting. Seeing the pure, unconditional love Lottie receives is melting her cold heart. Suddenly, it starts to drizzle. Lottie gasps, saying they need to head inside before her cute dress gets totally soaked. But right before they run, the weight of Lottie's invitation hits Veronica, making her panic at the thought of a mere maid being in a noble family portrait. She quickly compromises, smiling and saying she'd be more than happy to join a family picnic instead. A few months fly by and the trees are officially stripped bare for winter. Lottie wakes up rubbing her sleepy eyes as Veronica wishes her a happy 4th birthday. Out in the halls, the maids are buzzing, noting that the Duke never celebrates his own birthday but is going all out for the princess. They gossip about how the garden was totally revamped and how anyone who dared to disrespect Lottie was instantly kicked to the curb. One maid even questions if Lottie secretly has the Duke's actual bloodline because of how much he completely spoils her. Suddenly, Bihan bursts through the doors looking slightly damp, prompting Lottie to ask if it's raining outside. He rushes over, planting a sweet birthday kiss right on Lottie's cheek. He then hands over a massively oversized gift bag. Lottie excitedly asks if she can open it right now, and he totally encourages it. She reaches in and pulls out a gigantic teddy bear, her eyes sparkling with pure joy. Bihan smiles, asking if she likes it, and she gives him a massive thank you. Hugging her new bear, Lottie looks around and suddenly realizes something crazy about her surroundings. The mysterious building they were constructing a few days ago isn't just a room. It's a massive, heated greenhouse where spring flowers are blooming in the dead of winter. The heavy footsteps of the Duke approach, and Damien asks to hear her thoughts on his gifts. Lottie immediately shoves the giant bear into Bihan's arms and sprints toward her dad. But when she gets close, she looks up with big, confused eyes and asks where his presents actually are. Damien proudly gestures to the massive, blooming garden around them, saying it's right in front of her face. Lottie hilariously spins around in circles like a confused puppy, trying to find a hidden toy behind his back. Damien clarifies that the entire greenhouse garden is the birthday present. Lottie's jaw practically drops, realizing he built an entire climate-controlled building just for her. Seeing her shocked face, Damien gets a little pouty, nervously asking if she doesn't like it. She instantly snaps out of it, cheering that she absolutely loves it and wondering how anyone could ever call him a monster. Damien then smoothly mentions he heard from Veronica that there was something else she really wanted, as the maid flashes a cheeky peace sign in the background. Lottie realizes they're actually going to do the family portrait, but as she celebrates, a sinister inner monologue drops a massive bombshell. If she had known what this present would lead to, she never would have asked for it. 4-year-old Lottie crosses her arms, proudly declaring she is no longer a baby. Her maid, Veronica, gently offers to help her brush her teeth after a snack. But Lottie is completely over being treated like a toddler. She strikes a dramatic pose, determined to handle her own routine. Veronica watches in amusement as the little girl scrubs away like a total boss. Later, Lottie tracks down her dad with some big news. She pulls out a shiny silver locket she specially requested from a jeweler. Flashback to a few days ago when Lottie gave the artist top-secret instructions. Her dad looks completely puzzled by the tiny accessory. With a soft click, he opens it to reveal a beautiful portrait of Lottie's mother. Lottie gently pushes the locket into his hand. She wanted him to have something special so he would always remember her mom. She flashes a bright, hopeful smile, asking if he likes the surprise. The imposing Duke stares at the keepsake, completely speechless at his daughter's empathy. Seeing his reaction, Lottie is absolutely thrilled that her gift was a hit. Suddenly, a beautiful blue butterfly flutters by, signaling the arrival of spring. Outside, the terrifying Duke is now rocking a delicate, bright flower crown. Lottie hypes him up, telling him it looks incredibly pretty on him. Pumped up by her success, she decides Veronica definitely needs a flower crown too. She looks around the garden, hunting for the most gorgeous flowers she can find. The spring sun beats down, making the day exceptionally warm and bright. Seeking relief, she plops down into the cool green grass. Lottie stares at the tree shadows, fascinated by how they stretch across the lawn. She hops up and starts jumping around the yard like a little bunny. She turns it into a high-stakes survival game, instantly dying when she accidentally steps into the sunlight. Her dad watches her play and seriously contemplates planting a massive tree just for her. Young Damien nervously laughs, hoping the Duke is just making a weird joke. But Lottie panics, knowing her dad is wild enough to actually do it. She quickly scrambles over to stop his crazy landscaping plans. She grabs his sleeve, explaining that she just likes hanging out with him. The Duke softens, realizing the moment is only special because they are together as a family. Lottie gives him a thumbs up, promising to come back and play here again. Suddenly, she remembers her main quest and jumps back into action. She announces she is heading out to gather more flowers for Veronica. Her dad immediately grabs her hand, ready to tag along like a shadow. He refuses to let her go alone, terrified she'll get lost in the brush. Thankfully, Damien steps in smoothly, offering to be her trusty bodyguard instead. Lottie tells her dad to stay put and promises to be right back. The two kids venture into the sun-dappled woods together. Lottie strides forward confidently, flexing her past survival skills from living in a forest. Suddenly, they stumble upon a massive pile of broken tree branches. Damien points out that local animals gather these sticks to build their nests. Lottie gets slightly spooked, but Damien assures her there are no wild beasts around. She holds up a thick twig, wondering how they even build anything with such chunky wood. Damien goes into full nature documentary mode, explaining how weaving weak branches together makes them rock solid. Lottie is totally mind-blown by his random wildlife trivia. Damien humbly rubs his neck, admitting he only knows this stuff from his time in the demon realm. Lottie holds a pink flower up to her ear, testing out the look. But then she pauses, realizing she needs to find the perfect blooms for both Veronica and Damien. Hearing that she actually wants to include him, Damien's heart basically melts on the spot. Bihan asks Lottie if she wants to go deeper into the forest, and she agrees since she hasn't found her favorite flower yet. She trots through the brush, admiring all the colorful blooms around them. After gathering a beautiful bouquet, she decides she finally has enough. She turns to Bihan and cheerfully suggests they head back to the mansion. Suddenly, she freezes in her tracks, her eyes going wide with terror. A massive, terrifying monster lunges out of the shadows. Before the beast can strike, Bihan immediately steps in front to shield her. He recognizes the creature right away, completely unfazed by its size. Having fought these monsters in the demon realm, he knows exactly how they move, but he still takes a nasty scratch to the arm. He stays perfectly calm, noting that the beast's claws are venomous but the poison is slow-acting. Lottie watches with tears welling up in her eyes, completely horrified. Bihan glares at the creature, vowing to not let it touch a single hair on his sister's head. With a blinding flash of energy, he swings his arm and absolutely vaporizes the beast. The monster slumps into the grass, defeated in a matter of seconds. The forest falls dead silent as Lottie trembles on the ground. Bihan looks away, bracing himself, totally convinced she is now terrified of his demonic side. He sadly accepts that this is just the reality of who he is. He turns to check on her, expecting her to run away. But Lottie cries out that she was only scared because she didn't know what was going to happen to him. Bihan is completely stunned, realizing she isn't afraid of him at all. A soft smile breaks across his face, relieved that his sister still accepts him. Lottie grabs his good arm, urgently telling him they need to get his wound treated. But before they can take a single step, Bihan's eyes widen and he quickly shoves her behind him. A second unbelievably massive white wolf beast crashes through the trees. This monster is leagues bigger than the last one, glaring down at them with glowing red eyes. It notices the corpse of the first beast and goes totally feral. Lottie realizes how bad the situation is and knows she has to help. But Bihan screams at her to stay back, clutching his bleeding arm. Lottie stubbornly refuses to just stand by and watch her brother get wrecked. Desperate, Bihan begs her to run back to their father. Realizing she's basically a sitting duck in this fight, Lottie spins around and bolts through the tall grass. Bihan watches her go, breathing a huge sigh of relief that she's getting to safety. Now he just has to figure out how to survive this towering monster on his own. He is completely baffled by how a demonic creature even slipped past the Empire's magical gates. Knowing he is outmatched, he prepares to literally sacrifice an arm just to buy enough time for the Duke to arrive. Suddenly, he hears tiny footsteps and turns around in absolute shock. Lottie is sprinting right back into the danger zone. She knew Bihan's strength was fading fast and couldn't just leave him to die. She remembers his random nature trivia from earlier about how woven sticks get rock solid when covered in saliva. Grabbing a massive bundle of thick branches, she locks her eyes on the beast. As the monster opens its massive jaws to chomp them, Lottie absolutely yeets the bundle of sticks right down its throat, gagging it instantly. She grabs Bihan's hand, completely out of breath but refusing to give up. They sprint through the woods together, but Lottie's tiny legs are giving out. The adrenaline wears off and she can barely keep moving. Bihan glances back and realizes the furious beast is right on their tail. Without hesitating, he scoops Lottie up into his arms. He tucks her in like a football, sprinting away as the monster crashes through the brush behind them. Lottie clings to him in a panic, wondering how they are going to escape this nightmare. Bihan tells her not to worry in the calmest voice ever. And then he absolutely sends it, leaping right off a massive cliff with her in his arms, trusting his demonic durability to tank the insane fall. Bihan yells for Lottie to hold on tight, promising everything will be okay as they plummet down the cliff. He wraps his arms around her, bracing for the massive impact. Lottie gasps awake, wondering if she literally blacked out from the insane drop. She looks around the dark, rocky walls, realizing they somehow landed inside a hidden cave. She spots Bihan nearby, looking absolutely battered as he asks if she can stand. Lottie realizes he tanked the entire fall just to keep her safe, but Bihan totally brushes off the venomous scratch on his arm. She tears up, crying that it's completely unfair and she couldn't just leave him to get wrecked alone. Bihan gently pushes back, asking if she'd leave if their roles were reversed. Seeing her hesitate, he sighs and apologizes for snapping at her. Suddenly, a heavy downpour starts pouring outside the cave. Bihan is actually relieved, noting the rain will wash away their scent from the beast. He apologizes again for dragging her into this mess, but Lottie reassures him that her dad will definitely find them. Bihan agrees, knowing the Duke isn't like other ruthless masters, he actually cares about his kids. Still, Bihan knows they can't just sit around as sitting ducks until the rain stops. He vows to be the one to protect her if the beast finds them first. But before he can even finish his sentence, his legs give out and he collapses. Lottie catches him, panicking as she feels his burning forehead. The poison is spreading fast. He's taken way too much damage, but he still tries to smile and tell her it's just a temporary fever. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the Duke is on an absolute warpath looking for them. Veronica spots a massive puddle of black blood mixed with silver powder. She identifies it as demonic beast blood and immediately notices two sets of tiny footprints nearby. The Duke narrows his glowing red eyes, noticing human blood mixed in with the mess. Knowing Bihan can't use his full demonic strength in the Empire, the Duke orders an immediate search. With the weather turning violently awful, they have to move fast. Back in the cave, Lottie takes off her hair ribbon to use as a makeshift cold compress. She slaps the wet cloth onto Bihan's burning forehead, but it completely slides off his face like a wet noodle. She awkwardly adjusts it, determined to help him pull through. Suddenly, a delirious Bihan starts mumbling absolute nonsense about not eating something. In his fever state, he softly asks why she cares so much, wondering if he's only accepted because she's the biological daughter. Lottie looks at him and bluntly states it's because he's cute and small. But then she smiles, adding that he's the one who chose to be her family. Bihan realizes that before coming here, he only ever cared about surviving, but now he finally feels what a real family is. He stares at her, completely moved, before she asks why he suddenly turned around in the woods earlier. Flashback to the wolf beast, Bihan realizes he only ever lets his guard down for her. Suddenly, the massive white beast tracks them to the cave, and Bihan violently shoves Lottie behind him. With Bihan too weak to fight, Lottie squeezes her eyes shut and screams her dad's name. Instantly, a dark aura fills the cave and Lottie knows her dad has arrived. The Duke scoops her up in a tight hug, apologizing softly for being late to the rescue. He then looks at a battered Bihan and praises him for doing a great job protecting her. Lottie peeks over her dad's shoulder, asking what happened to the giant monster. The Duke tells her not to worry, mentioning that Veronica is handling the cleanup. He completely shields her eyes so she doesn't see the absolute bloodbath behind them. Meanwhile, a red-haired noble looks completely panicked about the insane situation. Veronica brutally shushes him, whispering that the Duke is trying to figure out who smuggled a demon beast into the Empire. Since all gate entries are recorded, the Duke announces he's heading back to his hometown, the demon realm, to get answers. He gently pats Bihan's head, jokingly asking if he looks like a cruel master who'd make a sick patient work. Bihan instantly gets flustered, realizing the Duke actually cares about his recovery. The Duke gives a soft, reassuring smile. He declares he's heading to the main demon house by himself to absolutely crack some skulls. Later, Lottie stares out her bedroom window at the pouring rain, wondering if it's storming wherever her dad is too. Back at the mansion, Veronica asks Lottie if she wants to go see Damien. Lottie missed her chance to say goodbye because she was asleep, but she knows the whole demon beast situation is a massive deal. She decides to keep her mouth shut about the magical book and just focus on visiting Bihan instead. She sneaks over to Bihan's room and peeks her head through the giant double doors. Bihan spots her instantly, claiming he knew it was her just by the sound of her tiny footsteps. He flexes that he's already almost fully healed, even though he took the brunt of the monster's attack. When he asks why she's visiting, Lottie plops right onto his bed, saying she doesn't need a specific reason to check on her family. She stares at his injured arm with a worried look. He rolls up his sleeve to show her that the nasty scratch is basically gone. He teases that she's the real problem since humans heal like absolute snails. Behan then slides a fancy red velvet box across the sheets. He reveals he picked up a gift for her during his trip to his hometown and gently offers to put it on her. Lottie's eyes light up at the gorgeous matching earrings and bracelet set. As he snaps the bracelet onto her wrist, she jokes that he's trying to bribe her, but he reveals it's actually laced with magic. If she ever needs him, the bracelet will instantly broadcast her location straight to him. Lottie jokingly pouts, complaining that this is going to totally ruin their games of hide-and-seek. Behan laughs it off, assuring her it only works if she wants him to find her. But deep down, he keeps the rest of the defensive magic a secret, praying she'll never actually be in enough danger to trigger it. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, we finally get a glimpse of Frodium's hometown in the demon realm. The Duke rolls up to a massive, glowing estate. He strides inside, completely ignoring the panicked chatter from the local servants. He locks eyes with Arthur, a pink-haired demon rockin' some serious horns. Arthur is literally the Duke of the Demon Realm, so he commands some heavy respect. But Lottie's dad skips the small talk, announcing he's here for answers. Arthur smirks, wondering what could possibly bring the most powerful man in the Empire to his doorstep. He boasts that he's the absolute eyes and ears of the entire demon realm. If something goes down, Arthur claims he is the very first guy to hear about it. So the Duke gets right to the point, demanding to know how a demonic beast spawned inside the Empire. Arthur plays dumb, shrugging his shoulders and claiming he has zero clue. The Duke's glowing red eyes narrow as he totally loses his patience. He unleashes a massive blast of dark magic without a second thought. The spell absolutely slams Arthur, throwing him backward. Magical spikes pin Arthur against the stone wall like a ragdoll. The Duke glares at him, knowing there's no way the realm's top info broker missed a massive breach like this. Arthur just smiles through the attack, staying completely cool under pressure. He swears he genuinely doesn't know how the beast crossed over, and even the underground smugglers are completely baffled. The Duke looks away, trying to figure out how someone bypassed his impenetrable gates. But Arthur drops a bomb, claiming he can easily predict who pulled the strings. He reminds the Duke that the Frodium family is basically hated by the demon elites. While Damien helped him early on, the Duke basically outgrew everyone and became a lone powerhouse. He now holds legendary status in both the human empire and the demon realm. Because he controls the only gate between the worlds, his haters formed a massive alliance just to overthrow him. They're desperately trying to find a loophole to bypass the gate and cause total chaos in his territory. Their master plan kicked off by trying to sneak monsters across the border. They used every dirty trick in the book to continuously smuggle beasts in. But the Duke's barrier was way too strong and they completely failed every single time. Except for this one time where a massive beast somehow spawned directly near the Duke's kids. Arthur smiles smoothly, praising the Duke for handling the monster before it could completely wreck the place. Trying to smooth things over, Arthur suggests the Duke kick back and stay a while. He totally tries to suck up to him, insisting that everyone in the realm absolutely adores their powerful master. Arthur smoothly points out that his people are trying to catch the Duke's eye, noticing a shift in the Frodium vibe. He teases that despite the Duke's icy exterior, he's actually treating his subordinates pretty well lately. But the Duke ignores the flattery, abruptly announcing he's heading back to the human world today. Arthur is totally caught off guard, reminding him that his workers are literally lined up waiting for him. The Duke clarifies that it's not that he doesn't care about his people anymore. He gives a soft side-eye, simply stating that his daughter is waiting for him at home. Arthur dramatically shakes the Duke by the shoulders, completely losing his mind over the idea of the terrifying lord acting like a family man. The Duke just stares blankly, genuinely confused why literally everyone overreacts to him having kids. Seeing Arthur's absolute shock, the Duke realizes the news of his daughter hasn't reached the demon realm yet. Arthur admits he usually ignores Empire gossip, but this spicy drop has his full attention. He's dying to know how the rebel demons managed to sneak a beast into the Empire, but now he's way more interested in the kid. Arthur asks who is watching over things while the Duke is away, and the Duke proudly mentions his highly competent subordinate. Arthur instantly assumes he means Veronica, asking if she plans to return to the demon realm. The Duke recalls a guy who was supposed to be a successor but casually mentions he probably died. Arthur brushes it off, acting like he couldn't care less about weaklings anyway. But the Duke firmly states he wouldn't even entertain the idea of sending Veronica back to this place. Arthur is totally baffled, insisting she should return to become a candidate for succession instead of playing babysitter. He warns that just working under the Frodium name doesn't guarantee her success. Arthur then asks the real question, is the Duke's new daughter going to be his official successor? The Duke shuts that down instantly, declaring his daughter will live a normal human life far away from the demon realm. Arthur rubs his chin, intrigued, asking if that means the kid is half human or if her mother was a witch. The Duke flashes back to the past, remembering how wild and contradictory the rumors about his wife were. He remembers the demons throwing around names like the Hateful Witch or the Cursed Witch. But nobody ever really knew the actual truth behind her identity. The Duke reflects that most of the stories were probably pure fiction anyway. However, her most famous and legendary title was the Eternal Ice Witch. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Lottie wanders the dark halls, annoyed that a sudden thirst woke her up from a sweet dream. She sneaks into the kitchen, grabs a massive pitcher, and pours herself a cup of water in the dead of night. Taking a sip, she suddenly hears a noise and realizes something is totally off. She peeks into the hallway, noticing that there are no patrols and all the servants are completely knocked out. Her eyes go wide as she jumps to the absolute worst conclusion: there's a thief in the house. She tightens her grip on her pillow, wondering who would be crazy enough to rob the terrifying Frodium estate. A tall, shadowy figure steps into the moonlight, making Lottie's heart absolutely pound out of her chest. She presses herself against the wall, quietly panicking as the mysterious intruder walks right toward her hiding spot. But as the light hits his face, it's just her dad looking completely exhausted from his trip. Lottie is totally baffled, wondering why the Duke of the Empire is creeping around his own house in the dark. The Duke casually asks if she just woke up, and she explains her midnight water run. Then it clicks. Lottie gasps, realizing he snuck back into the mansion without telling anyone. She angrily pouts, crossing her arms and scolding him for pulling a disappearing act on her. The Duke awkwardly rubs his neck, explaining he rushed back way sooner than Veronica expected. Lottie tears up, dramatically asking if she was the only one left in the dark about his grand return. He quickly kneels down to her eye level, gently explaining it was just too late to wake her up for a greeting. Mollified, Lottie instantly changes the subject, bragging about how she totally owned the mansion while he was gone. The Duke smiles, listening to her ramble before suggesting it's time to get back to bed. He offers to walk her to her room, acting like the ultimate bodyguard. They walk down the hall together, with the Duke reminding her that kids need their sleep to grow. Suddenly, Lottie's eyes light up with a totally misunderstood realization. She boldly asks if her big, scary dad is actually just terrified of sleeping alone during a thunderstorm. Cut to the two of them tucked into bed, with the Duke staring at the ceiling, completely flabbergasted by how he ended up here. But he softens, gently patting her to sleep and humming a sweet lullaby as Lottie drifts off into dreamland. As the Duke hums a soft lullaby, he tells Lottie she's only the second person to ever hear it. Lottie realizes the tune is totally different from the imperial song Veronica sings, immediately guessing that her mom was the first. She practically begs him for a bedtime story about her mother. The Duke sighs, agreeing to share a memory to help her sleep. He struggles to find the right words, wanting to make sure Lottie actually likes the story. He admits he gave his entire heart to her mother, loving her deeply despite his own hesitations. But then he drops a heavy curveball: her mom literally chose death, claiming she wouldn't love him anymore. He remembers feeling completely powerless, like he was just being dragged through absolute adversity. But Lottie chimes in, revealing that her mom actually called him incredibly affectionate. The Duke smiles warmly, admitting he used to think her mom was just straight up lying about that. But looking at Lottie now, he finally believes it was the absolute truth. He gazes down at her, feeling like the luckiest guy in the world. He whispers a sweet goodnight as his daughter drifts off into a peaceful sleep. She sleeps like an absolute rock through the rest of the night. The Duke watches over her, wishing her sweet dreams. But the next morning, Lottie bolts out of bed and makes a shocking discovery. She swings open her bedroom door to find the entire place looking like an absolute ghost town. Veronica casually pops up, acting completely unbothered as she explains they just moved her room. She leads Lottie down the hall and opens a pair of massive double doors. Lottie's jaw drops. Her new bedroom is ridiculously massive and totally decked out in luxury. She completely panics, thinking her dad completely overdid it just so she'd have room to play. Veronica laughs, explaining that the old room was way too sketchy for a proper lady of the Frodium house. She reveals the old annex was just a starter room to help Lottie adapt, but now it's time for the main building. Plus, this means she's finally in the same wing as Bihan. Suddenly, Lottie's original novel knowledge kicks in, remembering this exact plot point. In the book, the heroine struggled to adapt to the main mansion because the maids treated her like total garbage. That toxic environment eventually led to a massive misunderstanding between the heroine and the Duke. They both ended up assuming the other absolutely hated them, keeping a permanent distance forever. But Lottie refuses to let that happen, determined to build a real family and dodge that tragic ending. Just then, Veronica chimes in, announcing it's time for her tutoring session with the Marchioness. Lottie snaps out of her thoughts and sprints down the hall like her life depends on it. She finally returns to her studies after taking a much-needed break to recover from the monster attack. Marchioness Cyrus greets her with a glowing smile. The tutor is honestly shocked Lottie didn't use the break as an excuse to slack off, but Lottie is just thrilled to see her favorite teacher. The Marchioness laughs, eager to see how much of the material Lottie actually retained. To her surprise, Lottie absolutely crushed it, keeping up with the lesson perfectly. The Marchioness officially wraps up the day's class, and Lottie throws her hands up in pure victory. As the tutor packs her bag, Lottie insists on walking her out to say goodbye. On the way, the Marchioness throws out a random question, asking if Lottie has any friends. Lottie realizes that outside of Bihan and Damien, her social circle is basically non-existent. Suddenly, they bump right into the Duke in the hallway. Lottie explains she's seeing her teacher off, and the Duke decides to tag along. The Marchioness is totally flustered, feeling incredibly honored to have the Duke personally walk her out. The Duke asks about the lesson, and the tutor praises Lottie, saying she reminds her of her own son. She then turns to the terrifying Duke with a surprisingly bold request. She formally invites Lottie over to the Cyrus mansion for a playdate. Lottie acts like a total angel, politely accepting the invitation with a perfect curtsy. Later, Lottie brags to Bihan about nailing her etiquette, and Bihan jokingly asks if the Duke even has friends. Lottie whispers that they should keep it a secret, not realizing the Duke is standing right there, fully listening to them talking smack. Cut to the playdate where a young boy named Eustace steps up, saying he's heard a lot about her from his dad. Marchioness Cyrus asks Lottie if she wants to meet her son while her husband has a private talk with the Duke. Eustace introduces the idea and Lottie eagerly agrees to the playdate. But when she hears the boy's name is Joshua, she completely panics, realizing she can't escape the novel's original plot. In the original story, Joshua had terrible stamina, deeply disappointing his knightly parents. Instead of sword fighting, he unlocked a hidden talent in a totally different field: magic. As a young boy surrounded by knights, he realized his magical potential was off the charts. But to avoid any unwanted drama, he kept his powers completely under wraps. That is, until a massive pack of demonic beasts violently attacked the academy. Joshua dropped his disguise and unleashed his magic to save the heroine like an absolute Chad. After seeing his skills, the heroine instantly fell head over heels for him. He eventually took over the Cyrus family, stepping up as the ultimate male lead and securing a fairy tale happy ending. Lottie gulps, mentally preparing herself to meet this legendary main character. The Duke laughs, nudging her to go make friends since they're the exact same age. But Lottie notices the Duke is acting a bit sketchy and remembers Joshua was originally considered a family disappointment. She glares at him, silently judging him for being ashamed of his own son. The Marchioness cuts in, assuring them that Joshua is super gentle and will get along with everyone. She opens the door to his room, totally confused when she finds it completely empty. She apologizes and asks Lottie and Bihan to wait there while she tracks him down. Lottie realizes this whole trip was just a setup to introduce Joshua, so she vows to play nice. The Marchioness leaves them alone in the fancy guest room. She tells them to kick back and relax while she fetches some snacks. Before leaving, she drops a random warning not to freak out if they see a cat roaming the halls. With the adults gone, Bihan peacefully reads a book while Lottie asks if he regrets coming. She's already overthinking, assuming Joshua's absence means he's totally avoiding them. She crosses her arms, admitting she doesn't even want to meet the guy anymore. Bihan looks up surprised, since he thought she'd be super hyped to finally make a friend. Lottie sweetly says she doesn't need anyone else because she has him, but Bihan deadpans that he's not exactly a friend. Lottie stares at him, realizing his logic is completely sound. She playfully fires back that he doesn't have any friends either, making him flinch hard. Defensively, Bihan claims he definitely has friends back home. But Lottie completely roasts him, saying those demon kids were probably just local brats. Bihan blushes, softly admitting that at the end of the day, he really just needs his little sister. Suddenly, Lottie overhears a shadowy conversation nearby where the Duke brings up Joshua. The Duke recalls attending Eustace's wedding years ago. He remembers the joyful news when the Marquis and his wife were expecting a child. Eustace looked like the happiest man alive holding his pregnant wife. But the Duke abruptly cuts the memory short, grimly stating to Eustace that whatever happened with the child is not a happy story. Back in the guest room, Lottie looks around, wondering where that heavy conversation just came from. She stares blankly at the massive bed, wondering if she was just daydreaming. She looks around and realizes Bihan has completely vanished into thin air. Thinking he must have moved her while she was asleep, she decides to go find him. As she steps toward the hallway, a fluffy little tail swooshes past the doorframe. Lottie's eyes light up with pure joy as she spots the adorable mansion cat. She completely forgets her mission and sprints down the hall, chasing after the kitty. But she turns a corner and bumps straight into a boy who is definitely not Bihan. She looks up at the taller kid with glowing gold eyes, instantly realizing she just ran headfirst into Joshua Cyrus. She quickly introduces herself as Lottie, explaining she's there as his mom's guest. Joshua drops his guard and flashes a bright smile, apologizing for his rude silence. But then he pauses, his eyes narrowing as he suddenly recognizes exactly who she is. Without hesitation, he reaches out and absolutely squishes her cheeks, casually calling her a bite and leaving Lottie totally paralyzed. Joshua smirks down at Lottie, casually mentioning that it's amazing to finally see her again. He notes that she looks absolutely nothing like Arcelia, dropping her mother's name out of nowhere. Lottie completely freezes, knowing her cursed mother kept them isolated in a forest their whole lives. She snaps back, roasting his memory since he didn't even remember her name correctly earlier. Suddenly, the mansion's white cat happily rubs up against Lottie's legs. Joshua raises an eyebrow, completely surprised since the cat usually ignores everyone but him. Just then, Bihan finally tracks them down. Joshua suddenly grabs Lottie's wrist, eyeing her magical bracelet and asking if her family spoils her. Bihan rushes over in a total panic, asking where she disappeared to, and Lottie innocently blames the kitty. Bihan quickly steps between them like a literal shield, stiffly thanking Joshua for watching his lost sister. He announces that the Duke is ready for them to head home. But before they can leave, Joshua calls out to her. He smoothly points out that talking in the third person is pretty weird for her age, leaving Lottie totally flustered. As their carriage rolls away, Joshua watches from a window, his internal monologue revealing his dark secrets. He smirks, noting how just dropping Arcelia's name was enough to shake her up. He admits that if he hadn't known she was Arcelia's kid, he never would have recognized her. His glowing eyes narrow as he admits he's actually glad they don't look alike. He holds a serious grudge because her mother apparently roasted and boiled his brother in the past. He reflects on how Arcelia kept her father's identity a total secret, hiding that she was a monster duke's daughter. He stares out the glass, realizing Lottie is way more complex than the rumors suggested. Suddenly, Eustace bursts into the room, sweating bullets after hearing Joshua met the Frodium girl. Joshua flashes a fake smile, promising he didn't do anything, but Eustace is absolutely terrified because he doesn't know what Joshua is capable of. Eustace nervously asks if Joshua has forgotten their secret deal. Joshua laughs it off, claiming to be the most reliable son a guy could ask for. He promises to keep playing the perfect child, so Eustace's wife will never find out the dark truth. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Lottie watches Veronica absolutely shred through sword practice, wishing she had combat skills. She begs to learn, but Veronica gently shuts her down, saying she's way too young to swing a blade. Suddenly, a carriage rolls into the courtyard, and Lottie realizes her tutor has arrived. She sprints down the stairs, super hyped for her lesson with the Marchioness. But her jaw drops when she sees Joshua stepping out of the carriage with her, flashing a suspiciously bright smile. Lottie is internally screaming, realizing her dad actually approved this joint study session. She locks eyes with Joshua, knowing she has to play along. Inside the study room, the Marchioness slams down a massive stack of thick books. Lottie visibly pouts at the workload, so Joshua immediately plays the fake nice guy, teasing that it might be too hard for a little princess. Lottie instantly takes the bait, firing up and declaring she's going to study harder than anyone just to prove him wrong. The Marchioness smiles, completely oblivious and thrilled that the two kids are motivating each other. She is honestly blown away by how easily Lottie breezes through the advanced material. Flashback to when the Duke first hired her, and she was totally shocked he wanted her to teach basic etiquette. The Duke explained that Lottie lacked proper table manners but trusted the Marchioness to handle it perfectly. He figured she was the best fit since she was already close friends with Eustace. The Marchioness remembers sweating bullets while preparing her lesson plans. She was terrified of being too strict and absolutely traumatizing the Duke's kid. But since the terrifying Duke of Frodium asked personally, she literally couldn't say no. She arrived on her first day bracing for a total nightmare. Only for tiny, bubbly Lottie to greet her with a massive smile, melting her heart instantly. She quickly realized Lottie was just a normal, adorable girl who randomly recited dramatic novel lines. Now back in the present, Lottie confidently reads aloud from her advanced textbook. The Marchioness reflects on how Lottie's reading and writing skills are totally off the charts. She picks up complex languages like it's nothing, proving she's a low-key genius. The tutor realizes there's absolutely zero need to hold back, deciding to throw the most difficult studies at her moving forward. The Marchioness watches Lottie struggle with a tough problem, her pen scratching nervously against the paper. She gently asks if the question is too difficult and Lottie sweats, admitting she is totally lost. The tutor smiles, explaining it makes complete sense since this is literally an exam question meant for academy students. But Lottie locks in, focusing hard until she finally cracks the answer. The Marchioness is absolutely stunned, comparing Lottie's insane learning speed to her own son, Joshua. She admits Joshua was a total prodigy who learned way faster than the other kids, keeping his skills hidden even from his parents. Lottie proudly holds up her finished work, beaming with pure accomplishment. The tutor praises her and immediately pulls out the next textbook to keep the momentum going. Later, Lottie realizes Joshua has totally disappeared from the room and wonders where he wandered off to. Outside, Joshua casually bumps into Bihan, claiming he just came out for some fresh air after getting bored with his book. But Joshua immediately zeroes in on Bihan, noting there's something special about him. The two boys end up hanging out by the fountain, with Bihan asking why Joshua randomly wanted to chat. Joshua flashes a suspiciously friendly smile, saying he just wanted to get to know him better. Suddenly, Lottie watches from afar, totally shocked as she spots Joshua smoothly wielding a sword against Bihan. This completely breaks the novel's lore, where Joshua was supposed to be way too weak for physical combat. Thinking the boys are actually fighting, Lottie screams for them to put the weapons down. Bihan looks up in absolute panic, realizing his sister is literally climbing out of a second-story window. Lottie slips on the ledge, tumbling through the air like a sack of potatoes. But Joshua moves with lightning speed, catching her safely in his arms. Bihan immediately scolds her for pulling such a wild stunt, and Lottie awkwardly admits she misjudged her balance. Bihan genuinely thanks Joshua for the clutch save, deeply impressed by how fast he moved. Safe on the ground, Lottie asks for a moment alone to talk with Joshua. She thanks him for catching her and brings up how impressive his swordsmanship is. She compliments his skills, noting that it makes sense since his family leads the Night Order. But internally, her mind is completely spinning. The Joshua from the book relied strictly on magic because he couldn't even lift a sword. She realizes the story is completely deviating from the original plot, giving her hope that her tragic fate isn't locked in. Later, Bihan questions why Joshua was even practicing in the first place, clearly still suspicious of him. He admits he just wanted to test the kid's true strength, refusing to even call him by his actual name. Lottie then asks Bihan if Joshua can actually use magic like in the original story. Bihan grabs Lottie's wrist, touching the magic bracelet he forged for her back in the demon realm. He drops a massive bombshell, revealing that the Cyrus mansion actually has a barrier that suppresses all magic. He wonders why Joshua seems completely unbothered and physically fine in an anti-magic zone. Bihan explains that normal wizards feel like their limbs are tied up in this house, proving Joshua is hiding something insane. Lottie asks if it's really that big of a deal, and Bihan confirms it absolutely is. Eventually, Joshua admits to them that he indeed uses magic, but keeps it totally hidden to avoid family drama. The boys reach a silent understanding, both harboring crazy secret powers from their families. Bihan just sighs, deciding to drop the interrogation for now. Back home, the Duke notices Lottie looking incredibly gloomy and depressed. He kneels beside her bed, gently asking what's bothering her, but she refuses to spill the beans. She silently panics about the novel's dark prophecy where she is destined to die at age 11. She doesn't want to tell her dad because it sounds absolutely crazy, but her fear of death is totally eating her alive. The Duke pulls her into a tight, warm hug, promising that he will always be by her side no matter what. He jokingly complains that she's totally tied him down, strictly forbidding her from ever disappearing without a word again. Trying to cheer her up, he notices her fancy new outfit and asks where she's heading today. Since the capital has been super dangerous lately, he decides to personally escort her to the safest place in the empire. They arrive at the massive golden gates of the imperial castle, leaving Lottie totally starstruck by its size. She immediately complains that her tiny legs will hurt from walking, so the Duke scoops her right up. Suddenly, an older, distinguished noble spots them and calls out to the Duke. The man casually mentions he's there waiting for a summon from the Emperor himself. He then looks down at Lottie, giving a deep, respectful bow as he formally greets the little princess. Lottie spots the man from earlier and realizes he's actually her dad's friend. Surprised, the scary Duke even has a social circle. Eustace literally melts at the sight of her, absolutely smitten as the crowd murmurs about the adorable Frodium princess. He eagerly steps up, asking for a handshake because he's been dying to meet her in person. But the Duke just scoops Lottie up and totally ghosts the guy, bluntly stating they have to go see His Majesty. Eustace complains that the Duke is treating him like a random market vendor, completely ignoring his greeting. As the Duke walks away, Eustace remembers how his own son, Joshua, suddenly decided to step up as the proper successor. He recalls how baffling it was when Joshua completely flipped his usual lazy attitude. Flashback to when Joshua was caught randomly practicing his swordsmanship. His mother was absolutely thrilled to see him acting like a knight, but Eustace realized Joshua only started trying hard because he took an interest in Lottie. A few days ago, Joshua made his intentions crystal clear to his dad. He claimed he wanted to prepare for his future duties and confidently followed Eustace to the imperial castle. Eustace tells him to wait outside the palace doors and Joshua smoothly agrees. Back in the present, another noble greets Eustace in the grand castle halls. Lottie peeks over her dad's shoulder and spots Joshua standing there, totally surprised to see him. She taps the Duke, pointing out that Joshua and Eustace are here to see the Emperor too. Eustace watches them, nervously wondering what the terrifying Duke is planning to do. The Duke and Lottie reach the massive audience room doors, but the guards tell them they have to wait since the Emperor is busy. The guard turns to Eustace and Joshua, delivering some awkward news. He politely explains that Joshua isn't allowed inside the throne room. Joshua smiles and says it's totally fine, internally gloating that he only came here just to see Lottie anyway. He admits he originally wanted to crash his mom's visit to the Frodium mansion, but he backed off because Lottie gave him such a cold, unreadable expression last time. He stares at her now, hoping they can finally have a real conversation while they wait outside. Meanwhile, the Duke steps into the grand throne room, formally greeting the ruler of the empire. The blonde emperor sits high on his throne, noting that the Duke acts way differently than the previous Frodium lords. The Duke thinks back on how their relationship shifted ever since the emperor took the crown, making casual talks impossible. He internally reflects on how human ambition slowly climbs to the top. He knows that without a specific promise, a demon like him would only ever be allowed to guard the demon realm's gate. His loyalty to the emperor is the only thing keeping him tethered to the human world. The emperor admits he didn't expect the Duke to care so much, and the Duke smoothly replies that of course he does. The emperor then brings up a massive rumor spreading through the capital. He points out that while the Frodium family handles demonic affairs, Lottie is completely human. He expresses hope that she will become the next duchess since she has zero ties to the demon realm. The emperor boldly claims that at the end of the day, humans can only truly trust other humans. The Duke steps forward, his aura getting darker as he states he refuses to be betrayed just for siding with humanity. The Emperor instantly starts sweating bullets as the Duke reminds him of how humans have treated him despite his loyalty. The Duke steps right up to the throne, asking exactly what the Emperor is so worried about. His red eyes glow dangerously as he reminds the ruler that he is literally the only demon protecting them. Changing the subject, the Duke asks why he was actually summoned today. The terrified emperor stammers, bringing up the recent demonic beast attacks. He admits the Marquis already briefed him, and the Duke completely shuts him down, confirming his gate hasn't been breached. The Duke coldly states that there must be a flaw in the barrier separating the Empire from the demon realm. Meanwhile, back in the hallway, Eustace paces around, wondering where everyone went. He notices Lottie is completely missing, just as the Duke finally steps out of the audience room. The Duke immediately turns to Eustace, bringing up their recent meeting at his mansion. But before he can finish, the Duke asks where his daughter is and Eustace is totally confused, pointing out she was just with him. The Duke explains that kids aren't allowed in the throne room, so he had to leave her in the hall. His eyes narrow into a lethal glare as he demands the terrified guards explain what happened to his kid. A sweating knight stammers that the princess got bored waiting and wandered off to explore the castle. Cut to Lottie happily strolling through the gorgeous imperial gardens, totally thrilled to be on a solo adventure. Lottie wanders through the castle halls, immediately catching the attention of the palace staff. But when the maids rush over to fuss over the adorable princess, she totally bolts. Now she's completely lost in the massive corridors. Staring down at her tiny shoes, she wonders which way to go. She decides to just keep moving, hoping to spot a familiar path. Suddenly, she stumbles upon a massive, glowing garden. Standing before a gigantic, radiant tree, she looks up in absolute awe. Its magical aura completely wipes away her gloomy thoughts. But her peaceful moment is interrupted when a young blonde boy steps out from the bushes. He looks like a tiny prince and demands to know what she's doing there. He approaches her with a serious face. He firmly explains that she's trespassing in a highly restricted area. Somehow they end up chatting and Lottie accidentally blurts out her deepest fear about dying. She explains that she's doomed to die from a mysterious, incurable disease. Realizing she's trauma dumping on a total stranger, she starts crying in pure frustration. But before she can backpedal, the boy completely catches her off guard. He calmly mentions that escaping death isn't actually impossible. He shares a vague story about someone who tried to cheat fate even though they failed. When she asks if he's talking about himself, he quickly brushes it off as a friend's story. Suddenly, a servant leans in and whispers something to the boy. He casually excuses himself, saying he actually had a great time talking to her. Lodi waves goodbye to her new friend, Johan, as he heads out. But a second later, reality smacks her in the face. She's still completely lost. She decides to just find the exit herself before asking for directions. Meanwhile, her mind drifts back to a chilling memory in a snowy winter forest. She remembers being a tiny toddler wandering out in the freezing cold. Fast forward to the present, she's standing next to a black-haired boy named Joshua, bickering about him being a giant lizard. But behind her cute face, Lodi is hiding a dark secret about her illness. She remembers a grim prophecy someone once told her. To slow down her impending doom, she needs something incredibly rare. She needs a pure dragon's heart, specifically Joshua's heart. Looking at him, she starts low-key panicking over the wild things she's been told. She wonders if she really has to betray and hurt Joshua just to survive. Noticing her intense stare, Joshua asks if something's wrong. She stammers, awkwardly trying to play it off like he just has something on his face. Joshua just gives her a warm, wholesome smile. He jokes that she probably didn't recognize him at first. Lodi gets defensive, loudly declaring that she's super smart and definitely remembers her king lizard. He gently grabs her hand, pointing out that she's still as tiny as ever. Feeling his familiar body heat, she instantly remembers his true, massive dragon form. In another flashback, little Lodi stands beside her mother, Mary, out in the snow. They are staring down a giant, intimidating black dragon with glowing yellow eyes. Lodi knows that if it wasn't for her, the dragon would have absolutely ended them. The beast glares down at Mary, admitting he originally wanted to let her die. The dragon warns Mary that she doesn't belong in this freezing territory. He lowers his massive head, his eyes burning with intense rage. Mary looks completely unbothered, calmly asking if he's been sleeping this whole time. Suddenly, the dragon snaps, roaring furiously about his dead brother. But before he can go berserk, little Lodi completely wrecks the tension by giving his giant snout a massive hug. She adorably asks if he's playing a game, leaving the deadly beast totally stunned like a deer in headlights. Mary laughs, telling little Lodi to go play with the dragon, joking that the two of them are basically the same since they both sleep all the time. The massive black dragon glares, seriously annoyed at being compared to a lazy pet. Lodi completely claps back, insisting that king lizards are animals. When he claims he's a dragon, she totally ignores him, stubbornly stating that she's just Lodi. She puffs up her cheeks and starts sulking cutely, prompting the giant beast to sigh and tell her to look at him. Mary gently asks if Lodi wants to see him do a magic trick. The dragon casually asks what she wants to see, and when she says anything, he conjures a swarm of glowing spring butterflies out of nowhere. Lodi's eyes go completely wide, absolutely mesmerized by the shiny bugs. Cut to Lodi actually riding on the dragon's back like a boss, while Mary warns her not to slip on his slick scales. We learn that the spirit Arcelia let the dragon into the winter forest, but totally neglected him after. Instead, it was tiny Lodi who stepped up, bringing him medicine and nursing him back to health. She proudly points out that his gnarly wounds are looking way better now. Flexing her tiny ego, she demands a thank you for hooking him up with medicine every single day. The dragon chuckles, telling her he'll think about it next time they meet. Since she can't leave the forest, he promises to come to her. He gives her a gentle boop on the nose, telling her to remember his words. He adds that if she ever manages to leave the woods, she needs to come find him under the name Cyrus. After healing up enough to resume his noble duties, he finally dips out of the forest. Now in his human form as a young boy, Cyrus heads back to his estate, knowing his family is probably freaking out about his disappearance. Even as he slides back into his life as the Marquis's son, he can't stop thinking about the winter forest. Since dragons live for centuries, he had fallen into a massive depression nap after his brother died, leaving him totally isolated. Little Lodi was literally his only friend after waking up, the only person keeping him grounded to reality. Snapping back to the present, human Cyrus quickly warns Lodi not to turn around because her terrifying dad just pulled up. Lodi spins around and gasps, shocked to see her dad, the Duke, actually standing there in the sunset. She immediately launches herself into his arms, while the Duke shoots Cyrus a totally lethal glare. Her dad is fuming, practically radiating dark energy as he asks Cyrus how he thinks a father feels when his daughter vanishes. Cyrus plays it cool, smoothly saying he wasn't worried since they're in the Imperial Palace, though he admits her disappearing act was wild. Realizing she messed up, Lodi looks down and softly apologizes, asking her dad if he's mad. The Duke instantly melts like butter, gently patting her head and saying he's just worried about her. He then turns and formally thanks Cyrus for finding her again, but Cyrus just shrugs it off as a coincidence. But internally, Cyrus smirks, realizing he just scored a massive networking opportunity. Playing the innocent card, he politely asks the Duke if he can keep hanging out with the little lady. The Duke surprisingly gives him the green light, and Cyrus immediately promises to visit their mansion all the time. Lodi internally screams, having zero interest in being this guy's bestie. But from that day on, Joshua makes himself way too comfortable at her house. Back at the Frodium estate, a maid announces that her guest has arrived again. Lodi looks completely drained, and the maid just giggles because they both know exactly who it is. She swings the door open, mentally preparing herself to deal with Joshua. This dude practically lives there now, crashing her classes and pulling up even on her days off. To be fair, she admits he's decent company since her real friends are super busy lately. Cut to the garden, Joshua pokes her cheek, asking what's on her mind. She bluntly tells him she wishes he'd stop coming over. Joshua just laughs, calling her bluff. She complains that she wants to visit his house for a change, but her dad is always too busy to take her. Joshua asks why she doesn't just travel solo like he does, but Lodi sighs, knowing her overprotective dad would absolutely veto that idea. Changing the subject, Joshua grumbles about the massive anti-magic barrier surrounding her entire estate. Lodi shrugs it off, saying she doesn't really care about using magic anyway. Suddenly, Joshua raises a finger and sparks up a spell just to test the waters. A massive glowing magic circle instantly reacts in the sky, proving his theory that outsiders get automatically tracked if they use magic. He looks at Lodi, noting that setting up a literal surveillance grid just to protect her is totally unhinged. Lodi's eyes widen as the puzzle pieces finally click in her brain. She remembers her very first day at the mansion. The second her mom's magic faded, her dad instantly teleported to her using that exact tracking spell. Joshua is genuinely impressed, pointing out that funding a barrier this massive requires insane wizard connections. Staring up at the complex glowing runes, Joshua smirks and admits the barrier was actually coded by a pretty top-tier student. Joshua examines the glowing magic barrier, casually critiquing the messy runes left by amateur wizards. He smirks, bragging that he can totally dismantle the barrier and show her some real magic. But Lodi immediately shuts him down, telling him to stop acting sketchy since she doesn't even understand how magic works. Suddenly, a servant announces that Joshua's carriage has arrived to pick him up. He bids her good night and heads out for the evenings. Lodi watches him leave, quietly wondering what he was actually about to say. Fast forward to Lodi finishing up a long, exhausting study session. Her teacher dismisses her, mentioning that Joshua is already waiting for her in the reception room. The teacher warmly thanks Lodi for getting along so well with the young lord. Lodi awkwardly brushes it off, saying they just play together because they're friends. The teacher then drops a massive lore bomb, explaining that Joshua was born so weak, doctors predicted an early death. But miraculously, after meeting Lodi, his health skyrocketed to the point where he even practices swordsmanship. Flustered by the intense praise, Lodi quickly dismisses the teacher and heads out. But as she walks down the hall, something totally clicks in her brain. She realizes the fragile, sickly Joshua her teacher just described doesn't match the Joshua she knows at all. She walks into the reception room, spotting him waiting patiently by the sofa. He turns to her with those intense, glowing golden eyes, complaining that he's been waiting forever to play. But Lodi just freezes in her tracks, staring him down. Without hesitating, she bluntly calls him out, declaring he absolutely isn't the real Joshua. She fiercely demands to know where the actual boy is. He completely plays dumb, crossing his arms and claiming he has no idea what she's talking about. Refusing to back down, Lodi marches right up and fiercely grabs his clothes. She points out that the real Joshua has been sick since birth, and her teacher didn't even know this guy was a dragon. The fake Joshua's vibe suddenly goes completely dark as he questions why his fake identity is such a big deal. Lodi stays locked in, demanding to know the truth about the real kid. He breaks the heavy tension, casually asking why she suddenly got so close to his face. Seeing her relentless glare, he sighs and tells her it's okay to feel relieved. He flashes a mischievous smirk and simply asks her to keep his secret from the maid, Dolores. Later, the atmosphere in the room shifts to something a bit strange. Lodi decides to keep his secret, figuring he must really care about Dolores to hide the truth. Meanwhile, the fake Joshua's mind drifts back to a memory from one of his massive, centuries-long naps. Back then, he was just drifting through an endless, depressing ocean of boredom. Suddenly, a human tracked him down in the pitch black. A desperate blue-haired guy named Eustace begged the dragon to grant his wish. Snapping back to reality, fake Joshua realizes this kid shares the exact same mana as that old contractor. While he's lost in thought, Lodi totally crashes, falling asleep right into his arms like a ragdoll. Cut to the middle of the night, outside the quiet mansion windows. Two maids are whispering in the hallway, ruthlessly gossiping about how Lodi isn't even the Duke's biological kid. Suddenly, Lodi is standing there in the dark, wondering if she's trapped in a weird dream. The maids keep whispering, calling her family situation completely messy. Lodi listens in, remembering how she was left completely alone in the mansion that first day. She watches as the maids continue to spill the tea in the shadows. They laugh maliciously, noting that the Duke doesn't even have a lover. They brutally conclude that there's no way Lodi is his biological child. They even predict she'll be permanently kicked out of the Frodium estate soon. The gossip hits her hard, but remembering her mom's promise that the Duke was her real dad, she completely snaps at their toxic lies. Suddenly, she jolts awake in bed, accidentally grabbing fake Joshua's tie in a total panic. Realizing she just yanked him, she quickly lets go and apologizes. He gently asks if she had a nightmare, and she groggily asks when he got there. With a soft, wholesome smile, he tells her he's just been sitting there, watching over her the whole time. Fake Joshua casually lectures Lodi about how important normal behavior patterns are. But Lodi is completely zoned out, rubbing her eyes and obsessing over her wild dream. She vividly remembers the nightmare where she went totally feral and grabbed the gossiping maids by their collars. She tries to justify her dream tantrum, convincing herself she didn't actually do anything wrong. Honestly, she figures her reaction was totally rational for someone dealing with that level of disrespect. After all, throwing a fit is exactly how any angry kid would handle the situation. Still, she hesitates, wondering if just lashing out is really the smartest way to express her anger. She realizes that if she actually acted out that dream in real life, the drama would completely spiral out of control. Worse, people might start spreading rumors that the Duke raised a literal villainess. Suddenly, Joshua lightly bonks her on the head, snapping her back to reality and whining that she's ignoring him. Annoyed, Lodi rubs her head and quickly points out that he's actually the one who showed up late today. Joshua smirks, flexing that his swordsmanship training has been ramped up every single day thanks to his miraculous recovery. Lodi deadpans, asking if the Marquise is just making his training sessions brutal on purpose. But Joshua completely brushes it off, boasting that they just recognize how insanely talented he is. Lodi sighs, munching on snacks and telling him he should probably just aim for average to avoid the extra work. Joshua immediately pouts, complaining that he pulls up to her mansion every day and gets absolutely zero respect. He dramatically asks what it takes to get a warm welcome around here. Then his tone shifts and he drops a massive bombshell: he won't be able to visit as often anymore. Lodi is caught off guard, asking why it's suddenly going to be so hard to see him next year. He reveals that it isn't a sudden decision at all. Dollars is officially sending him to the academy. Lodi's eyes go completely wide at the mention of the academy. It's the ultimate dream school, strictly reserved for elite noble kids between the ages of 9 and 11. Cut to Lodi throwing a massive pity party, whining to her dad that she desperately wants to go to school too. Her dad shoots it down instantly, arguing that a public debut will let her meet plenty of people without the chaos of a crowded school. Lodi completely freezes, totally shook because her dad is usually a massive softie, but right now he's dead serious. She pushes back, knowing there's zero chance the academy would ever reject the Duke's daughter. But the Duke stares her down, coldly stating that she is absolutely not allowed to leave the Frodium estate. Defeated, Lodi turns around and awkwardly shuffles out of the room. As she leaves, she bumps into her dad's aide, Bellant, giving him a super gloomy goodbye. Bellant chuckles, teasing her for being so distracted, before turning his attention back to the Duke. He drops the friendly act completely, pulling out a highly classified report. He explains that shadowy enemy forces mistakenly believe their massive magic barrier has weakened. Because of this, they are secretly planning to send demonic beasts right over the border. Bellant notes that demons can't just casually stroll through the barrier, so this attack is basically a twisted experiment. The Duke calmly orders him to keep monitoring every single movement closely. His eyes glow with a terrifying red aura as he vows that absolutely no magic or demons will step foot in the human world. He makes it crystal clear he will annihilate anything that threatens his daughter's safety. Meanwhile, Lodi is back to her lessons with her quiet friend Bihan. But instead of studying, she's just aggressively glaring at him, totally zoning out. Bihan stops reading when Lodi randomly blurts out that she likes her family way more than her friends. Bihan sees right through her, asking if she's only acting this clingy because Joshua is leaving. Internally, Behan admits that when Joshua first showed up, he genuinely didn't care or feel threatened. He only tolerated the guy because Lodi finally had another friend inside the mansion. He even hoped they could all just be a chill friend group. But as Joshua practically moved in, Behan realized something terrifying. What if Lodi ends up liking Joshua more than him? The thought of losing his top spot makes him grip his book in pure bitter jealousy. Speak of the devil, Joshua suddenly strolls into the room, casually greeting Behan. Behan immediately throws absolute shade, calling Joshua out for basically living at their mansion and telling him to take a hint. Before things can escalate, Joshua suddenly remembers he has somewhere to be. He dashes off, cheerfully claiming he completely forgot he was in a rush because he was distracted by cake. Lodi storms up to Joshua, putting her hands on her hips and furiously demanding to know why he lied to her. Joshua plays totally dumb, innocently asking what she's talking about while they stand in the sunlit garden. She calls his bluff, reminding him he explicitly said he decided not to go to the academy. Joshua casually brushes it off, pointing out that this explains why she sprinted over in such a huge hurry after class. Flustered, she demands to know why he completely deceived her. Joshua just hits her with a smug smile, teasing that he's glad he caught her off guard. He totally reads her mind, pointing out she secretly doesn't want him to leave. He drops the act, admitting that Dolers did decide to send him to the academy, so he wasn't technically lying about the plan. Lodi starts lightly swatting at him in frustration, arguing that those are two completely different things and accusing him of messing with her on purpose. Joshua just laughs it off, while Lodi aggressively copes by claiming it's actually a massive win that he's staying. But her logic completely flops and Joshua smirks, knowing he was right all along. She stubbornly doubles down, refusing to admit he's got her figured out. But just when she thinks the whole academy drama is finally over, the timeline fast-forwards to nightfall. Turns out an academy admission certificate did arrive at the mansion, leaving Lodi absolutely bawling her eyes out. She clings to Behan like a koala, desperately begging him not to leave her stuck with just Joshua to play with. Behan gently comforts her, completely validating all the sweet things she says about how smart and talented he is. He explains that forming connections at the academy might literally save their Frodium family one day. In a brief flashback, an elegant woman reminds someone that to inherit a throne, you have to constantly level up. Behan uses this logic, gently holding Lodi and promising that becoming a duke will give him the power to serve her even better. He gives her a soft head pat, promising he'll be back to visit during the holidays. Meanwhile, the duke's aide formally informs him that his carriage is ready outside. The duke nods, fixing his insanely sharp outfit and preparing to leave immediately. Just then, Lodi waddles in, asking her dad where he's heading. He immediately pauses, noticing his daughter looks like a total mess with super puffy eyes from crying all night. Seeing her runny nose, the terrifying Duke of the North instantly drops into pure dad mode, helping her blow her nose. He knows she's been crying a literal river because Behan is packing up for the academy. The aide chimes in, saying they were all super stressed about her and asking how to cheer the little princess up. The Duke gently wipes the last tears from her eyes but points out she's definitely still a bit weepy. Lodi changes the subject, asking if he really has to go to the palace right now. She innocently asks if the emperor knows about his weakness and why he's basically commuting to the palace 24/7. The duke hesitates, noting that the royals don't actually know the full truth, but they know enough to keep him on a leash. He internally reflects on his brutal reality. As a member of the demon tribe, a guy like him had zero business inheriting a duke's title. Lodi proudly declares she already knows the lore, mentioning how the previous duke asked him to take over the family. The duke smiles, confirming it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to claim real power. But power always comes with a massive catch, leading him to sign a sketchy treaty with the emperor. Instead of just comfortably sitting on the duke's throne, he had to swear absolute loyalty to the royal family. The stakes are insanely high. The Frodium family's dark secret is that they are literally hiding the existence of the entire demon tribe. For centuries, their estate has served as a massive safe haven for the demons. If the emperor suddenly pulls the plug and leaks their identity, the Frodium Empire would collapse overnight. All their historical prestige would vanish, and his people would be instantly hunted down and slaughtered like monsters. The duke's eyes glow with terrifying resolve, completely determined to stop that apocalyptic outcome by playing the emperor's game. He stares down at little Lodi, his core motivation for keeping the family intact. Even though protecting his people means constantly putting everything he loves at risk, it's a burden he gladly shoulders. Finding comfort in his daughter's sweet questions, he completely melts and pulls her into a warm, tight hug. He jokes that the emperor doesn't know his soft side and still views the demon tribe as a bunch of bloodthirsty, savage monsters. Honestly, hiding his true nature is exhausting, and if he showed any more weakness, it would be game over. He asks Lodi if there's anything else she wants to hide, playfully offering to help cover up all her little secrets. With a warm, reassuring smile, he promises to be back from the palace soon. Left alone in the massive halls, Lodi decides to go bug Behan for a game of catch since her dad is busy. But when she opens the door, she completely freezes. Behan and Veronica are decked out in fancy outdoor clothes. Veronica smiles warmly, dropping the bomb that they're heading out to go shopping for Behan's massive academy admission day. Lodi is hyped to tag along on the shopping trip, even though she has literally no idea what she's supposed to be buying. She wanders the bustling streets, completely mesmerized by the sights since everything outside the estate is still super new to her. The group debates their game plan, deciding to prioritize school uniforms before hunting down textbooks and pens. Lodi looks up at Behan, innocently asking if the fitting is going to take a long time. Veronica unfolds a shopping list that is absolutely massive, confirming they are definitely in for a marathon. Spotting a high-end tailor shop nearby, Veronica points them toward the entrance to get started. Inside, an elegant staff member immediately greets them and directs them to the uniform fitting area. Lodi looks around the lavish room, suddenly hit with a serious case of déjà vu. She squints, trying to remember if her dad had brought her to this exact spot before. Suddenly, the traumatic memory hits her. This is the exact shop where her dad forced her to try on a ridiculous mountain of dresses. She remembers being completely buried in clothes because the Duke refused to hold back on spoiling her. She shakes her head, muttering about how insanely stubborn her dad can be when it comes to shopping. Now entirely sure, she confirms this is definitely the same boutique from her exhausting fashion show. Veronica excuses herself to go speak directly with the head tailor about Behan's orders. The tailor stands Behan in front of the massive mirrors, gently instructing him to raise his arms. She explains that they'll take his exact measurements and adjust a pre-made pattern to fit him perfectly. She notes that even though young nobles grow fast, a uniform still needs a tailored fit so it doesn't look completely sloppy. Veronica watches proudly, mentioning that the standard academy dress code requires the long-sleeved uniforms. She smiles warmly, admitting that seeing the new students stepping out in their blazers is her absolute favorite thing. The tailor agrees, assuring Behan they can always take the seams out later when he inevitably hits a growth spurt. Behan humbly nods, agreeing that he's definitely been shooting up in height lately. Meanwhile, Lodi starts imagining a group of older girls at the academy completely swooning over him. In her mind, Behan is literally glowing with top-tier pretty boy energy. The imaginary fangirls absolutely lose their minds, claiming he looks like he just stepped out of a romance novel. They squeal about meeting him in the halls, confirming Lodi's worst fears. Lodi realizes that with Behan's insane visuals, the academy is basically a trap. She starts low-key sweating, fully expecting him to get completely bombarded with love confessions on day one. As she stresses about his future social life, a random brown-haired boy suddenly appears beside her. He awkwardly points to the sofa, asking if he can sit in the empty spot next to her. Lodi snaps out of her thoughts and cheerfully invites him to take a seat. But after a minute, she notices him completely staring holes into the side of her head. Already bored out of her mind from watching the fitting, she wonders what this kid's deal is. He breaks the ice, smoothly guessing that someone in her family is enrolling in the academy this term. When she asks how he knew, he points out that since they're both the same age, it's too early for them to be enrolling themselves. He adds that the tailor shop is always packed with incoming older students this time of year, making it an easy guess. Lodi's eyes light up, genuinely impressed by his Sherlock-level deduction skills. But then she squints, realizing he's just been sitting there hyperanalyzing everything. She bluntly calls him out, accusing him of only staring at her because he was hunting for a seat. The boy completely fumbles, sweating as he awkwardly tries to deny it. They sit together on the fancy sofa, waiting as Behan quietly watches them from the fitting stand. Lodi suddenly tilts her head, hearing the boy mutter something under his breath that she can't quite catch. Flustered, he hides his face behind his hands, completely embarrassed that she noticed him whispering. He sighs heavily, clearly struggling to keep whatever little cool he had left. Trying to recover his riz, he nervously asks Lodi if she's getting bored just sitting around and waiting. Lodi casually says she's totally fine, explaining that Behan's fitting is just taking a while because of the crowd. Right on cue, Behan steps down and gives the boy a perfectly polite but absolutely lethal smile, telling Lodi to call him if anything happens. Feeling the heavy passive-aggressive heat, the boy awkwardly notes that Lodi and her brother seem super close. He casually drops that his own relationship with his brother actually started off pretty rocky. But before he can trauma dump, a noblewoman calls him over, signaling that it's time for them to leave. He suddenly turns beet red, clutches his chest, and shouts a frantic goodbye about seeing her at the academy before bolting like a deer in headlights. The nervous boy completely panics and bolts, his face turning bright red as he runs away. Lodi blinks in confusion, realizing her random new friend just pulled a total vanishing act. She looks over and spots Bihan chatting with a bubbly blonde noble girl. The girl excitedly suggests they meet up at the upcoming entrance ceremony and asks for his name. With perfect posture, he formally introduces himself as Bihan. The blonde girl absolutely short-circuits, realizing she's casually talking to Prince Bihan himself. But Bihan instantly shuts her down, coldly stating that it's way too early to be making plans. Completely embarrassed, the girl awkwardly excuses herself and scurries away. Lodi watches the whole brutal interaction, visibly sweating over how ice-cold her brother can be. She shakes her head, thinking there's no way she can let him keep acting like a total menace to society. Suddenly, an older noble steps forward, completely interrupting her thoughts. He cheerfully introduces himself and greets her as Princess Proteum. But the vibe instantly sours as the surrounding nobles start aggressively whispering about her being the monster duke's daughter. The guy completely ignores the whispers, casually asking if her terrifying dad is joining them today. Unable to handle the toxic atmosphere, Lodi just completely dips and runs out to get some fresh air. She steps outside, taking a massive breath of relief away from the gossiping snobs. She decides to take a quick stroll around the shopping district to clear her head. Suddenly, she spots a silver-haired girl stumbling around, looking completely groggy and about to faceplint. Without hesitating, Lodi rushes over and catches her hand, gently asking if she's okay. The mysterious girl looks up, genuinely touched by Lodi's totally wholesome rescue. Still holding tightly onto Lodi's hand, she slowly pulls herself back up. Lodi helps her stand, making sure the girl didn't scrape her knees on the pavement. The silver-haired girl stares at her in awe, amazed by how incredibly kind she is. For a split second, the girl even compares Lodi's warm energy to her own mother's. Meanwhile, Lodi stares back, totally stunned. This random girl looks exactly like her mom. From the silver hair to the bright blue eyes, the resemblance is uncanny, except this girl has a much colder vibe. The girl gently lifts Lodi's hand, checking to see if Lodi got hurt while catching her. Noticeably staring, Lodi snaps out of it when the girl awkwardly asks why she's looking at her like that. Lodi brushes it off, secretly noting that while her mom was super expressive, this girl's face is completely blank. The girl asks if Lodi needs any help navigating the streets, but Lodi politely declines. She inwardly celebrates, just glad she managed to help out someone so striking. But the silver-haired girl suddenly asks why Lodi is still gripping her hand. Staring down at their locked fingers, the girl admits she oddly feels like she has to hold on. Suddenly, a frantic woman runs around the corner, desperately searching for the wandering kid. The woman spots them and yells out the name Dahlia. Realizing her own family is probably waiting, Lodi politely bows and tells the girl she has to go. Dahlia watches her leave, then turns back to answer her panicked guardian. As Lodi walks away, a massive plot twist hits her brain. Dahlia is the girl destined to become her father's new adopted daughter after Lodi dies. In the original novel, Dahlia is described as a ridiculously pretty doll-like girl with absolutely zero emotions. But despite her icy exterior, the book says her genuinely warm heart attracts everyone around her. It turns out Dahlia had always been lingering around the Proteum estate, long before her official adoption. And in the original storyline, the Duke was totally aware of her existence. According to the lore, right after the original Lodi tragically passed away from her illness, the Duke approached Dahlia. He coldly offered to adopt her simply because he desperately needed an heir to continue his bloodline. For a struggling kid, it was an insanely attractive proposition. It was literally the opportunity of a lifetime to step into endless wealth and power. But shockingly, the young Dahlia actually turned down the terrifying Duke's offer. Instead, the people who eventually forced Dahlia into the Duke's mansion were her twisted adoptive family, the Viscount Lopez. A dark memory reveals her abusive relative coldly ordering her to go back and secure the bag for them. And so, Dahlia was eventually adopted by the Duke's family, but in reality, she was basically sold off like property. One morning, young Dahlia finds herself in a completely strange place. But surprisingly, she adapts to the Proteum mansion incredibly fast. Unlike the tragic princess from the original story who basically withered away, Dahlia seems right at home in the massive estate. Lodi remembers that in the novel, Dahlia was a regal but misunderstood girl who was constantly judged as evil. But in this timeline, the fact that she's absolutely adored by everyone in the mansion is painfully obvious. Watching from afar, Lodi squints, wondering if this is really the same Dahlia she read about. Suddenly, the Viscountess rushes over, completely out of breath from searching for the silver-haired girl everywhere. She breathes a massive sigh of relief, anxiously asking Dahlia if she's got a headache or feels sick. Dahlia softly reassures her adoptive mother that she's just a little dizzy, but totally fine. The Viscountess gently tells her to speak up if she's hurting, showing some serious, genuine mom energy. Lodi watches this wholesome interaction, completely shook, because the novel's Dahlia was brutally abused by the Lopez family. But right now, their relationship actually looks super loving and totally normal. Lodi starts sweating, wondering if this is just a coincidence or if someone else possessed the character. She realizes that even major plot-relevant characters can completely flip the script in this new reality. Her mind drifts to Joshua, remembering his true, terrifying dragon form from the original story. In the book, demonic beasts caused a literal apocalypse, but Lodi decides to trust her overpowered dad to handle the threats. Just then, Veronica tracks Lodi down outside, perfectly on time. It turns out Veronica is on a mission to lock down some new dresses and look through the fashion catalogs for the little princess. Lodi deadpans, asking if Veronica just bought out the entire store again. Back inside, Bihan apologizes for making them wait so long and suggests checking out the next shop. As they walk, Lodi asks Bihan why he gave that blonde girl from earlier the absolute cold shoulder. She points out the obvious tension, wondering what actually went down. Lodi mutters that the girl was clearly crushing on him, but Bihan brushed her off like an icy breeze. With a soft smile, Veronica chimes in, noting that Bihan is only ever gentle with Lodi. Bihan immediately gets defensive, grumbling that Lodi is going to have a hard time making friends if she keeps overanalyzing everything. Lodi just giggles, completely unbothered by his little lecture. Meanwhile, Veronica spots a stationery shop and heads over to grab some notebooks and ink. She also promises to arrange for some new bookshelves and furniture to be sent straight to the mansion. Catching an opportunity, Lodi holds up a shiny, magical orb and asks Veronica to buy it for her. It's an oracle stone, a super rare item, and Veronica asks if she really needs it. With a sneaky little smile, Lodi nods, saying she needs to gift it to someone special. Cut to the mansion, where the Duke scoops Lodi into his arms, gently scolding her for sneaking out to the village without permission. Veronica confirms they successfully secured all the academy supplies for Bihan. Lodi looks up at her terrifying dad with massive puppy dog eyes, saying she has a huge favor to ask. The Duke immediately softens, asking his precious daughter what she needs. She stammers, swearing that she doesn't hate studying and actually loves her tutor. But then she drops the question, can she please take a break from school for a little while? She admits that with Bihan leaving for the academy so soon, she's feeling super bummed out. She begs for just a few days off so she can hang out with him before he leaves. The Duke hesitates, knowing it's not a huge request, but he still values her education. Lodi totally plays her trap card, warning him that if she has to study, she'll just be too distracted to focus anyway. Amused by her tiny threat, the Duke smiles and caves, agreeing to give her some time off and promising to notify her tutor, Cyrus. Lodi happily cheers and absolutely bolts down the hallway like a speed demon. It turns out Lodi was genuinely heartbroken about Bihan leaving the estate. Veronica notes how much Lodi is going to miss him once he's officially at the academy. The Duke watches his daughter run off, fully dedicated to adjusting her schedule so she can maximize her time with her friend. He internally decides it's probably best to keep that dragon kid, Joshua, away from the mansion for a while to give them space. Meanwhile, at a different estate, a completely clueless Joshua asks his mom if it's time to go visit Proteum. His mom casually adjusts her dress, dropping the bomb that Lodi is actually taking a few days off from everything. Joshua's eyes go wide in pure shock, instantly deciding he has to march over there and find out what is actually going on. Joshua turns to leave, casually declaring he's heading out alone today. He explains that the Proteum estate told him there's temporarily no need for him to visit. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, a tray of sweets sits untouched as Lodi realizes she hasn't seen Joshua lately. Peeking over her book, she wonders if her magic teacher just decided to ghost them. But Bihan totally uses this to his advantage, playfully tapping her and celebrating the fact that he gets to monopolize his little sister. Lodi glances at his book and asks what he's reading. He tells her it's a story about elementalers. He explains a legend where a severe drought hit a village, and these elementalers teamed up with elves to pray for rain. Lodi's eyes sparkle like crazy, totally captivated by the magical miracle story. She asks if the author just made it all up, but Bihan calmly states that elementalers were actually real back in the day. He dives deeper into the lore, explaining that these ancient beings had the rare ability to recognize both humans and hidden demons. Lodi is amazed, thinking it sounds absolutely magical. Bihan clarifies the mechanics, noting that the elementalers themselves didn't spot the demons. The elves did the scanning and basically snitched to them. Suddenly, a maid cracks the door open, calling out to the young princess. She gently reminds them that it's officially bedtime, prompting Lodi to bid Bihan a good night. Left alone, Bihan sighs, realizing he needs to pack his stuff for the academy. Looking at the clock, he mutters about how insanely fast time is flying. While packing his uniforms, he admits he totally saw this academy admission coming since the day he was adopted. But looking at his bags, he completely dreads having to go. He admits he hates leaving Lodi behind, Loki jealous that she'll probably just end up hanging out with Joshua all the time. Suddenly, Lodi adorably peeks her head through the door, whispering to see if he's asleep. Bihan tells her he's awake, and she admits she's feeling super sad again about him leaving tomorrow. With massive puppy dog eyes, she asks if she can sleep in his room for the night. He immediately softens and lets her in, asking if she told the head maid, Veronica, which she did. Tucked into bed, Lodi fiercely complains that the academy is completely extra for making him leave so early before the entrance ceremony. She grumbles that traveling manually is a total drag when teleportation magic exists. Bihan explains that the academy actually ensures top-tier safety by strictly regulating travel. He adds that banning teleportation is also meant to keep things fair for the students who come from families that can't use it. He praises the school for prioritizing equality, noting it's just the natural way to handle things. Lodi accepts it, but she makes him promise to return home every single vacation without fail. Bihan completely agrees, swearing he'll be right back the second he gets a break. He gently looks at her, telling her not to make sad faces while crying. He gives her a totally heartwarming look, telling her that her smile is the most beautiful thing in the world. With the heavy emotions cleared, he wishes her a good night, and they both finally get some sleep. The next morning, a lavish carriage is already prepped and waiting outside the estate. A nervous Bihan asks his adoptive dad if he'll actually do well at the academy. The red-haired man completely hypes him up, telling him to keep his spirits high because he's going to crush it. Bihan stares back at the massive Proteum estate, carrying the heavy weight of his family's legacy. He knows his adoptive father holds massive power as the Duke right now, but the future is totally unpredictable. To guard against any sudden downfall, Bihan is determined to build an ironclad network of allies in his own generation. He clenches his fists, absolutely refusing to be the weak link that makes the Proteum family crumble. Lodi runs up and gives him one last massive hug before he goes. The Duke tells Bihan to take care, and Bihan formally promises not to let him down. But the Duke drops the stern act, clarifying that he's only warning him because he's afraid Bihan will push himself too hard. He gently tells the boy that he can see the massive, stressful burden he's carrying in his heart. The Duke reassures him that he doesn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. He completely validates him, reminding Bihan that this isn't some brutal obligation and he should just take it easy. He offers a final, warm word of caution to be careful out there. Bihan looks up at him in awe, realizing the Duke never actually forced him to go to the academy in the first place. Touched by the genuine respect, Bihan flashes a confident smile and tells his dad not to worry. As the carriage rolls away, Bihan looks out the window, relieved to see that Lodi's eyes aren't swollen from crying today. Lodi puffs up her cheeks, determined not to cry every single day so Bihan won't worry about her. The Duke just laughs at her cute, pouty face, teasingly calling her proud. He praises her, pointing out that it would be totally awkward if she greeted their upcoming guest with a teary face. Lodi blinks in confusion, asking what guest he's talking about, completely forgetting she only took a few days off. Suddenly, a literal thunderbolt of realization hits her. She has to go back to her boring tutoring sessions right now. Sitting at her desk, she remembers hearing that Bihan actually headed off to the academy. Her maid, Veronica, gives her a sympathetic look, but Lodi bravely declares she's going to stay strong for her brother. Veronica smiles proudly and suggests they finally dive into her studies. Lodi stares at a mysterious book her teacher assigned her to read. The glowing book is a deep dive into the legendary Elementalers. Veronica explains the text is ancient, written back when elves still roamed the world. The lore reveals that, for some unknown reason, Elementalers slowly vanished from history. Along with them, the elves also went completely off the grid, leaving behind almost zero records. Lodi connects the dots, realizing that demons and demonic beasts also faded away around the exact same time. Suddenly, her thoughts are interrupted as she wonders about a mysterious carriage waiting outside. After grinding through her intense study session, Veronica finally dismisses her for the day. Veronica casually mentions Joshua didn't show up today, instantly sending Lodi into a panic thinking he's sick. Veronica quickly clarifies that the boy just decided to take a lazy day at home. Lodi stares down the empty hallway, feeling surprisingly lonely. She realizes that Joshua has basically been ghosting her lately. Veronica aggressively agrees, pointing out he used to crash every single one of her classes. She playfully teases Lodi, asking if they had some kind of secret fight. Lodi gets defensive, remembering she actually told him she wanted to focus on Bihan before he left. Then it clicks, she remembers her dad stepping in and sending a direct letter. The letter literally banned Joshua from visiting the estate for a while. She tries to shrug it off, figuring a centuries-old dragon wouldn't throw a petty tantrum over a temporary ban. She tries to distract herself by watching a cute cat completely destroy a ball of yarn. Cut to Joshua, who is absolutely sulking because he was banned from the Proteum mansion. He grips his fist, super salty that the Duke took his little joke so personally and hit him with an instant ban. Suddenly, Joshua spots a fancy carriage rolling up to his window. He crosses his arms, trying to act cool as he asks his surprise visitor why they came when he's literally banned. It's Lodi, she awkwardly blushes, explaining that her dad was the one who banned him, not her. Dropping the excuses, she straight up admits she just missed him and came to hang out. She even pulls out a surprise gift to smooth things over. Joshua totally flexes his ego, acting like a mighty dragon can't be bribed with shiny trinkets. Lodi immediately droops, looking completely defeated, which instantly cracks his tough guy act. She holds up a beautiful, glowing messenger stone, explaining it's basically a magical walkie-talkie. She remembers Veronica explaining the tricky rules of using it to communicate across long distances. Joshua stares at the stone, still trying to act completely underwhelmed. He grumbles that her visiting him alone every day is bound to cause some massive drama. Lodi winks, pointing out that with this stone, they can chat anytime without her having to sneak out. He tries to act cold again, reminding her he's an ancient beast and doesn't care about a simple rock. Lodi completely ignores his edgy act and begs him to just try it out once. She earnestly explains that she just wants to be able to talk to him without waiting for him to visit. Joshua's cheeks instantly turn bright red as the sweet logic finally hits him. Lodi admits that her overprotective dad kept her from visiting earlier. She holds the stone out, honestly confessing that she just really wanted to see him. And that's exactly why she brought him the ultimate long-distance lifeline. Joshua absolutely beams, his ego fully restored, joking that she's totally obsessed with him. He gracefully accepts the stone, while Lodi awkwardly blushes at his sudden confidence boost as her carriage waits outside. Lodi asks Joshua what he wants to play since reading books is getting super boring. Joshua bluntly states his mansion literally has 0 toys, flexing that he's a dragon and doesn't mess with human hobbies. Annoyed, Lodi sighs and asks if he at least has some paper and colored pencils to doodle with. Joshua notices her cute drawing of Veronica and asks if she really likes her that much. Lodi excitedly agrees, explaining that Veronica takes the absolute best care of her in the whole mansion. She remembers how the other maids gave her serious side-eye, treating her like a total nuisance just for existing. Joshua listens closely as she vents about how all the other maids were exactly the same. Lodi then points out that besides Veronica, she's never seen Joshua act friendly with any of the staff. Joshua casually suggests it's probably because Veronica wasn't originally just a regular maid. Lodi keeps doodling, quietly admitting that the other maids completely hated her guts. Joshua raises an eyebrow, acting totally surprised by the drama. He watches her draw Arcelia, noting that she looks pretty uncomfortable talking about it. Changing the subject, Lodi asks Joshua if he's been out of the woods for a while, which he confirms. He hesitates for a second before asking if she knows how she even managed to leave that forest. Lodi completely freezes. She admits she actually found out the truth shortly after arriving at the Duke's mansion. She explains her mom tried to warn her about leaving the woods, but her tiny brain didn't understand the heavy lore back then. Forcing a brave smile, she claims she's okay now because her dad is with her, even though she misses her mom like crazy. Joshua randomly suggests she just ask the Duke for a stepmother, but Lodi shoots that down instantly, fiercely defending her parents' bond. Joshua genuinely doesn't get it, arguing that a stepmother is still family. He pushes her buttons, asking why she wouldn't want a new mom to take care of her. Lodi gets absolutely fed up. Joshua laughs it off, claiming dragons are fiercely independent and just don't understand human family dynamics. Firing back, Lodi demands to know what kind of dragons his family even is. Joshua's vibe drops as he quietly mentions he used to have a brother. When she asks about his parents, he dodges the question, making it clear his brother was his only real family. Lodi gasps, excitedly asking if his brother was as huge as him. Joshua smiles, promising he's going to grow just as massively big one day. Lodi lays back, claiming Joshua was already gigantic when she first saw him, but he teases that she was just the size of a peanut back then. She innocently asks where his brother is right now. Joshua looks away, a shadow crossing his face as he admits he can't see him anymore. Trying to lighten the mood, Lodi points out that meeting a dragon even once is a crazy flex. Joshua instantly smirks, his ego totally repaired as he agrees. Lodi's mind drifts back to the snowy woods, recalling that Joshua's brother somehow knew her mother. She looks sad, wishing her mom was still around so she could finally get some straight answers about her past. In a hazy flashback, her mom warmly promises that even if they have to say goodbye, Lodi's father will always protect her. She remembers being a tiny baby in her mom's arms, super curious about the dad she had never met. Her mom had promised that once they left the woods, her father would take perfect care of her. But standing in the present, Lodi realizes she still feels totally lost without her mom's guidance. Later, a storm of bad vibes triggers an absolutely terrifying nightmare. In her dream, she's constantly paranoid that fighting with the toxic maids will get her kicked out of the mansion. Her nightmare logic convinces her the Duke hates her so much he won't even bother scolding her. She fears he's just turning a blind eye to all the relentless bullying. An evil maid completely mocks her, calling her a fake princess and a pathetic crybaby who doesn't belong there. Another maid coldly complains about Lodi making a mess in the hallway. But this second maid unexpectedly offers to take her to a different room away from the drama. Lodi jolts awake, sweating from the dark nightmare. She rubs her eyes, suddenly realizing the nice maid from her dream looked insanely familiar. Flashback to when she first arrived, she remembers a sweet maid named Mary who tried to help her. Lodi completely lights up, realizing Mary was the one looking out for her all along. She immediately tracks her down. Finding Mary, Lodi asks why she practically vanished from the mansion. Mary gently explains she wasn't fired, but was basically banished to a different wing due to some unfair staff politics. Because she was moved so far away, they never crossed paths. Relieved she didn't completely hallucinate her, Lodi gives her a massive, wholesome hug. Lodi happily pokes Joshua through the magical messenger stone, explaining that since her roommate called in sick, she decided to spend her day off annoying him instead. She excitedly tells him about reconnecting with Mary, the sweet maid who used to help her when she first arrived. In a flashback, Mary admits she's only heard updates about the young princess from afar but is super glad she's doing well. Lodi smiles warmly, genuinely relieved that Mary is thriving too. Taking a massive leap of faith, Lodi nervously calls out to her. She completely drops her guard and asks Mary a super blunt question about whether she actually likes her. Mary absolutely short-circuits, waving her hands in a total panic because she knows she can't just casually judge a royal. Undeterred, Lodi stares her down with a deadpan expression, asking if that means she hates her. Flustered, Mary quickly denies it, admitting that Lodi is just way too cute to hate. With a triumphant smile, Lodi instantly claims her, declaring that Mary is now officially in charge of her personal area. Back in the present, Joshua listens to her ramble from his room. He points out that she must be riding a massive high since she hasn't stopped bragging about it. Lodi kicks her feet like an excited kid, totally admitting that she's on cloud nine. She confesses that since she's never really had a close maid before, finally securing one feels like a huge win. Joshua sighs, bluntly telling her that her lack of friends is just because she actively keeps everyone at arm's length. Staring into his own messenger stone, he drops some solid advice. If she just took the first step, literally all the employees would adore her. Lodi rests her chin on her hands, quietly wondering if she really just needs to open up more. She admits that dropping her walls is still super embarrassing for her. Suddenly, Joshua's voice starts glitching out like bad Wi-Fi. Cut to Joshua completely sweating as his stone starts dying, scolding her for not recharging its mana this whole time. Lodi completely fumbles, asking what he means just as his voice completely cuts out. Taking Joshua's advice to heart, Lodi actively seeks out Mary, asking if she's busy. When Mary says she's free, Lodi boldly grabs her hand and drags her toward her bedroom. Stepping inside, Mary is completely mind-blown by the massive size of the room, realizing the Duke really does spoil his daughter. When Mary asks what her exact duties are, Lodi casually admits she only called her in because she was super bored. Lodi offers her some fancy cookies, but Mary nervously declines since they were specially made by the chef for the princess. Lodi completely ignores protocol and hands her one anyway, sweetly calling it payback for the cookies Mary gave her in the past. Touched by the totally wholesome gesture, Mary accepts, praising how incredibly kind Lodi is. Looking around, Mary asks where Veronica has been lately since she's usually glued to Lodi's side. Lodi explains that Veronica has been swamped with work, basically shadowing her dad everywhere. Meanwhile, Joshua is back at his desk studying, recalling how Lodi mentioned needing Veronica's permission just to visit him. Lodi had admitted that without Veronica, she basically had no one watching her back. She confessed that it's not like she never wanted other maids around her. She was just completely traumatized by how toxic the staff used to be. In a flashback, a group of maids is shown gossiping about Lodi finally calling someone else for help. They whisper about how the young princess usually strictly talks to the aide and the butler. A senior maid shuts down the gossip, explaining that the old, toxic maids totally ruined Lodi's trust by spreading wild fake rumors about her. She sighs, realizing that's the real reason Lodi acts like a complete ice queen around the staff. Trying to break the ice, the maids decide to share the massive pile of cookies Lodi had given out. Mary smiles softly, realizing that despite the awkwardness, the entire staff secretly adores the young princess. Suddenly, the scene shifts to the massive, imposing imperial palace. The blonde emperor sits on his throne, thanking the duke for training the knights and asking for updates on the demonic beast sightings. The duke stands tall, reporting that while they handled two recent incidents quietly, the threat is far from over. He firmly explains that these beast attacks aren't just random, brief glitches in the matrix. If this was a one-time thing, the beasts never would have breached their borders in the first place. The emperor accepts his grim logic, prompting the duke to drop an absolutely unhinged proposal. He stares the emperor down and suggests they officially announce the existence of demonic beasts to the entire world. The emperor looks completely shook, realizing this drops a literal truth bomb on centuries of hidden history. The duke casually acknowledges that this revelation will absolutely throw the empire into pure, unfiltered chaos. But with his red eyes glowing, he confidently states that humans aren't as weak as they look, and they will figure out how to completely wreck the demonic threat. The duke calmly suggests to the emperor that it's time to tell the knights in training about the existence of demon beasts. He points out that the knights are currently enduring brutal training without even knowing their real enemy. The blonde emperor nods, agreeing that the heavy secret needs some serious thought. He coughs into his hand, clearly looking completely drained for the day. Meanwhile, the duke reflects on how this current generation is moving way faster than expected. Back at the estate, Lodi happily chatters about her fun day hanging out with the maid, Mary. Watching her smile, the duke is genuinely relieved his daughter is growing up without any dark trauma. Lodi catches him zoning out and curiously asks what's on his mind. With a soft smile, he tells her he's just thankful she's growing up so healthy. Lodi suddenly points out that the flowers in the room have been swapped out. She praises the maids for taking care of such tedious chores every single time. The duke is totally impressed by her observation skills, glad she's finally letting her guard down around the staff. Suddenly, a mysteriously sealed envelope slides onto the desk. Lodi's eyes go wide, realizing the letter is sealed with pure magic. The duke casually waves his hand over it, safely breaking the magical lock. Instantly, an aggressive voice screams a name out of the envelope, complaining about the realm's gate being closed. The duke completely deadpans, threatening to set the noisy letter on fire. But Lodi thinks it's the coolest thing ever and begs to see how it works. Defeated by her cute face, he sighs and lets the magic play out. A glowing hologram pops up, bringing a serious message from the demon side. The projection confirms they had to completely block the passage to track down rogue demon beasts. The voice sharply reminds the duke of his true roots, asking if his loyalty lies with the human empire or the demons. He tells the duke he needs to make up his mind on what's more important. The hologram warns that the gate has been blocked for too long and immediate action is required. The duke internally stresses, knowing that siding with the demons would unleash monsters all over the human empire. But looking down at Lodi, he firmly shuts the idea down. He gently pats her head, promising that as long as she lives in the empire, he'll never turn his back on it. When Lodi asks if he needs to go to the demon realm, he casually says he'll just send Veronica instead. Right on cue, Veronica teleports into the room looking like an absolute boss. She reports that the gate has been successfully reopened, heavily easing the tension on the other side. But she warns that the hostile demons could absolutely launch another attack. The duke stares out the window, wondering what will happen if a full-blown war erupts like in the ancient stories. He admits he's trying his best to peacefully reconcile the demon realm with the human empire. Veronica asks the tough question: if war breaks out, what will he do? He knows his loyalty lies with the demons, but the only thing holding him back is that his precious daughter is 100% human. Suddenly, a panicked servant bursts through the doors. The servant screams that the princess is urgently asking for a doctor. The duke absolutely loses his mind, sprinting down the estate halls in pure panic. He fiercely beats himself up, thinking he was way too careless with his fragile human daughter. He bursts into her room, gasping for air, only to find Lodi sitting there looking totally fine. Sweating bullets, he frantically asks her where she's in pain. Lodi blinks in confusion and casually states she doesn't hurt at all. She explains that after reading her weird magic book, she just wanted a physical checkup to be safe. Relieved, the duke praises human doctors and completely supports her proactive idea. Lodi smiles, completely oblivious to the massive heart attack she just gave her dad. The Duke steps out of the room to immediately call for the physician. Standing in the quiet hallway, his mind flashes back to the countless people he's watched die over the centuries. He realizes he never once associated that inevitable death with Lodi before today. Back inside, Lodi sits on her bed, innocently wondering what she should do next. Out in the hall, the terrifying Duke of the North stares at the floor, muttering a shaky curse as the sheer terror of almost losing her finally hits him like a freight train. Lodi lays in bed, completely baffled by her dad's sudden cold shoulder, wondering if he just felt obligated to check on her before leaving. Later, she spots the Duke in the hallway and calls out to him, cheerfully asking what he's up to. But he literally just turns his back and walks away, vaguely claiming he's busy. Lodi stares in pure confusion as her dad completely dodges her without a second glance. Refusing to let it slide, she marches right up to him and demands to know why he's been avoiding her. The Duke looks totally caught off guard, definitely not expecting his tiny daughter to confront him so bluntly. She reminds him that he's been incredibly warm and sweet ever since she arrived at the estate. But his sudden mood flip is giving her serious whiplash, and she wants answers. The story flashes back to a heavy conversation where the Duke asks his aide, Veronica, how many human deaths she's seen. Veronica solemnly admits she's watched a lot of close friends and loved ones pass away. The Duke points out that a human's tiny lifespan is basically just a blink of an eye for an immortal demon. Veronica quickly realizes he's pulling away because he's terrified of the brutal pain he'll feel when Lodi eventually dies. He confesses he's only known his daughter for a short time, but he's already insanely attached to her. He knows that spending the rest of her short life together will absolutely wreck him when her time finally comes. Veronica completely understands his fear but gives him some brutal, necessary honesty. She tells him that the fact he's already agonizing over this means he's in way too deep to distance himself now. She advises him to treasure Lodi as much as possible, building happy memories to buffer the eventual heartbreak. She warns the Duke that if he keeps pushing his daughter away, he'll end up regretting his cowardice forever. Snapping back to the present, the maids are stressing out because Lodi is sulking heavily on Mary's day off. They suggest taking a stroll through the garden to lift the little princess's spirits. Lodi heads outside, a little embarrassed that her gloomy mood is so incredibly obvious to everyone. She reaches out to touch a blooming rose, remembering this beautiful garden was a special gift from her dad. Suddenly, a wave of sadness hits her and she completely tears up. The maids quickly rush over, assuring her that His Grace is just swamped with work and still treasures her immensely. Trying to cheer her up, they offer to grab her anything she wants from the local village. They know she's cooped up in the mansion, so they happily volunteer to be her personal delivery service. Lodi clutches her chest, super touched by how much the staff genuinely cares about her well-being now. Later that day, Lodi wanders the halls and finally spots the man she's been looking for. She completely dashes over as the maids politely greet the Duke. In a brief flashback, Lodi remembers checking her own pulse, knowing the original novel predicted her early, tragic death. She figures if she's really destined to die soon, she should be showing some serious symptoms by now. But her heart beats perfectly and she feels totally fine. Realizing she's basically the picture of perfect health, she beams with pure relief. Back in the hallway, the Duke awkwardly tries to pull his vanishing act again. Lodi pouts, completely fed up with his icy behavior. She confronts him directly, asking if he really believes she's healthy and not hiding some secret illness. The Duke gulps nervously, sweating bullets under his tiny daughter's intense gaze. He starts rambling about how she has cold energy and poor circulation, clearly overthinking her mortality. Lodi totally loses it and bursts out laughing, telling him he's worrying way too much over literally nothing. But she isn't letting him off the hook that easily, locking eyes with him. She grabs a handful of his coat with her tiny hands, refusing to let him run away this time. She directly asks what his deal is and why he's acting so weird. The Duke tries to play dumb, acting completely confused about why she tracked him down. But Lodi isn't having it, calling him out for dodging her like the plague. He goes totally silent, realizing he can't hide his massive anxiety from her. Since he doesn't deny it, she demands a straight answer right now. Her little hands tightly clench his jacket as tears prick her eyes. With her voice breaking, she asks the heartbreaking question, does he hate her now? The Duke's expression shatters, and he finally drops the tough guy act, admitting he's just a massive coward terrified of facing the death of someone he loves. Without missing a beat, Lodi looks up like an absolute boss and declares that if he's a coward, she'll just have to be brave enough for the both of them. Lodi lays in bed, overthinking her recent actions and wondering if she messed up by acting purely out of responsibility. Later, she spots the Duke in the hallway and calls out to him, cheerfully asking what he's up to. But he literally just turns his back and walks away, vaguely claiming he's busy today. Lodi and Veronica stare in pure confusion as her dad completely dodges her without a second glance. Refusing to let it slide, Veronica marches right up to the Duke and demands to know why he's been dodging the little lady. The Duke looks totally caught off guard, definitely not expecting his aide to confront him so bluntly. Veronica reminds him that she works for Lodi, pointing out how sweet and kind the young princess has always been. She notes that his sudden mood flip is giving Lodi serious whiplash, and she wants answers. The story shifts to a heavy conversation where the Duke asks Veronica how many human deaths she's seen. Veronica solemnly admits she's watched a lot of close friends and loved ones pass away. The Duke points out that a human's tiny lifespan is basically just a blink of an eye for an immortal demon. Veronica quickly connects the dots, realizing he's pulling away because he's terrified of the brutal pain he'll feel when Lodi eventually dies. He confesses he's only known his daughter for a short time, but he's already insanely attached to her. He knows that spending the rest of her short life together will absolutely wreck him when her time finally comes. Veronica completely understands his fear, but hits him with some brutal, necessary honesty. She tells him that the fact he's already agonizing over this means he's in way too deep to distance himself now. She advises him to treasure Lodi as much as possible, building happy memories to buffer the eventual heartbreak. She drops the ultimate reality check, warning the Duke that if he keeps pushing his daughter away, he'll end up regretting his cowardice forever. Snapping back to Lodi, the maids are stressing out because she is sulking heavily on her head maid's day off. They suggest taking a stroll through the garden to lift the little princess's spirits. Lodi heads outside, a little embarrassed that her gloomy mood is so incredibly obvious to everyone. She reaches out to touch a blooming rose, remembering this beautiful garden was a special gift from her dad. Suddenly, a wave of sadness hits her and she completely tears up. The maids quickly rush over, assuring her that His Grace is just swamped with work and still treasures her immensely. Trying to cheer her up, they offer to grab her anything she wants from the local village. Since she's cooped up in the mansion, they happily volunteer to be her personal delivery service. Lodi clutches her chest, super touched by how much the staff genuinely cares about her well-being now. Later that day, Lodi wanders the halls and finally spots the man she's been looking for. She completely dashes over like a track star as the maids politely greet the Duke. In a brief flashback, Lodi remembers checking her own symptoms, knowing the original novel predicted her early, tragic death. She figures if she's really destined to die soon, she should be showing some serious warning signs by now. But checking her pulse, her heart beats perfectly and she feels totally fine. Realizing she's basically the picture of perfect health, she beams with pure relief. Back in the hallway, the Duke awkwardly tries to pull his vanishing act again. Lodi pouts, completely fed up with his icy behavior. She confronts him directly, asking if he really believes she's healthy and not hiding some secret illness. The Duke gulps nervously, sweating bullets under his tiny daughter's intense gaze. He starts rambling about how she has cold energy and poor circulation, clearly overthinking her mortality. Lodi totally loses it and bursts out laughing, telling him he's worrying way too much over literally nothing. But she isn't letting him off the hook that easily, locking eyes with him. She grabs a handful of his coat with her tiny hands, refusing to let him run away this time. She directly asks what his deal is and why he's acting so weird. The Duke tries to play it cool, wondering internally why she even sought him out. In a massive plot twist, he drops a bombshell and accuses her of avoiding him. He goes totally silent, realizing he can't hide his massive anxiety from her. Since he doesn't deny the tension, she demands a straight answer right now. Her little hands tightly clench his jacket as tears prick her eyes. With her voice breaking, she asks the heartbreaking question, does he hate her now? The Duke's expression shatters, and he finally drops the tough guy act, admitting he's just a massive coward terrified of facing the death of someone he loves. Without missing a beat, Lodi looks up like an absolute boss and declares that if he's a coward, she'll just have to be brave enough for the both of them. The Duke casually asks his aide how Lodi spent her day, learning she just hung out with Joshua. Veronica smirks, calling him out for secretly checking up on his daughter even though he's intentionally distancing himself. She smiles to herself, totally confident that his stubborn tough guy act won't last much longer. The next morning, Lodi wakes up to the sound of the maids buzzing excitedly about a massive farmer's market in the village. Feeling a sudden jolt of sadness, she realizes everyone seems so happy without her. But then she notices a heavy coat draped over her bed. It's her dad's jacket. He must have secretly checked on her during the night. Staring at a wilted flower, she grumbles that her cowardly dad better apologize to her soon. Even though it wasn't a nightmare this time, she still feels incredibly down in the dumps. The maids keep chatting about how the huge market is finally opening today, hoping they get off work early to see it. Lodi's eyes light up as she realizes her weird dream from before must have been a vision of this exact festival. She quietly wishes she could go too, but suddenly a familiar voice calls out her name. It's Joshua, he grins, proudly announcing that he finally found her hiding spot. He immediately starts teasing her, calling her a total lazy bum for oversleeping, which makes Lodi aggressively pout. Spotting the oversized coat, Joshua assumes she finally made up with the Duke, but Lodi sadly admits they're still not talking. Brushing it off, Lodi leaves a letter on her desk, hoping her dad will find it later, and asks Joshua what he needs. Joshua gets straight to business, saying he needs her help with something important. Lodi invites him into her room, apologizing if she kept him waiting too long. He shakes his head, staring at her intensely before finally dropping the question. He pulls out his magical communication stone and asks her to take a look at it. He explains that the stone is completely drained of magic, and Lodi asks if that means she has to buy a brand new one. Joshua tells her she could, but then she'd have to buy a matching pair. Instead, he casually offers to just recharge it for her. Lodi is absolutely baffled, pointing out that the estate's massive anti-magic barrier should make that impossible. Joshua smirks like an absolute boss, flexing his hand as pure mana swirls around him. He totally bypasses the system, revealing he secretly hacked the estate's barrier so he could freely cast spells inside. Lodi is mind-blown by how easy he made it look, but Joshua admits he had to sweat a little to pull off the crazy bypass. Changing the subject, Joshua notices the buzzing energy around the mansion. Lodi explains that the maids are super hyped about the massive farmers market happening in the capital today. Joshua nods, mentioning that the city completely transforms whenever a festival like this pops off. He hypes it up, talking about all the insane street food, rare items, and epic fireworks they usually have. Seeing Lodi's eyes practically shining, Joshua bluntly suggests they just sneak out and go see it. But Lodi sighs, knowing her overprotective dad would immediately shut it down and send guards to tail them. Joshua complains that having a tail totally ruins the vibe. Lodi strictly refuses, completely terrified of getting in trouble if they get caught sneaking around. Joshua smirks, asking if she's seriously underestimating his skills to bypass the Frodium security. Extending his hand like a prince, he confidently promises that his magic is way too overpowered for them to get caught. Lodi hesitates, remembering how her dad has been ignoring her anyway, and she desperately doesn't want to be left alone again. Making a split-second decision, she grabs his hand and agrees to go wild just this once. With a flash of magic, they instantly teleport, though the dizzying warp makes Lodi stumble a bit. They land in a super creepy, dark alleyway, and Joshua explains he couldn't just spawn them in the middle of a crowded street. They step out of the shadows and Lodi's jaw completely drops. The sunlight hits her face as she takes in the breathtaking view of the bustling capital. Joshua dramatically presents the vibrant market, asking where she wants to hit up first. Overwhelmed by the chaotic energy, Lodi admits she has absolutely no idea where to start. She notices the streets are divided and look totally different from each other. Joshua explains that one side is for commoners and the other is full of high-end noble boutiques. Since she already lives in luxury, Lodi excitedly demands to explore the commoner side. But as they walk, people immediately start pointing and whispering, completely recognizing the famous Duke's daughter. Realizing their cover is blown, Joshua grabs her hand and pulls her out of the crowd. He quickly decides they need to completely alter her appearance before they get snitched on. With a quick swipe of magic, he totally wrecks her original look, turning her hair blonde and her eyes a vibrant green. To avoid blowing her cover, Lodi asks Joshua if he can change her hair color with his magic. She excitedly asks for white hair and blue eyes, but Joshua shuts it down, saying those are Arcelia's signature colors and they shouldn't go too crazy. With a quick spell, he gives her a gorgeous blonde and green-eyed look, guaranteeing nobody will recognize the famous Duke's daughter. Satisfied with her new aesthetic, Lodi happily leads the way into the bustling village. The streets are absolutely packed with vendors selling cheap goods and yelling out daily deals. A friendly stall owner spots them and gushes over how adorable they look together as siblings. Lodi almost blows their cover by blurting out she has her own brother back home, but Joshua quickly steps in to play it cool. To smooth things over, the vendor offers them a sweet discount, inviting them to check out her wares. Lodi spots a beautiful glowing pink gemstone and excitedly asks if she can touch it. Joshua gives her the green light and she happily reaches out. Holding the mysterious stone, Lodi notes that it has a strange temperature, wondering what it actually is. Joshua praises her sharp eye for fine objects, casually telling the vendor they'll take it. They leave the stall, heading deeper into the wildly decorated festival streets. Lodi suddenly turns around and hands the shiny stone right back to Joshua. He's totally confused, but she smiles and insists it's a gift just for him. As he holds the stone, it glows brightly, and he realizes it actually contains a trapped spirit. Lodi gasps, asking if this means she can finally use elemental magic. Joshua quickly bursts her bubble, saying it's impossible without high spirit affinity. But he reassures her that it's still an insanely rare item since spiritualists are super hard to find nowadays. He explains that he knows a lot about them because they were everywhere before he took his centuries-long dragon nap. Lodi teases him for being a total sleepyhead, and he just shrugs, throwing the joke right back at her. She pouts but admits he's totally right. Lodi cautiously asks him why spiritualists disappeared, wondering if he'll get suspicious if she connects it to the missing demons. He admits he has no idea, while Lodi tightly clutches the spirit stone, deeply relating to the feeling of being trapped inside a cage. She asks if they can free the spirit, but Joshua explains that only a true spiritualist can pull that off. He suggests turning it into a piece of jewelry, but Lodi worries that taking it out will blow her cover. Despite the risk, she stubbornly declares she's taking it home, feeling terrible for the lonely little spirit inside. Suddenly, another vendor calls out, asking if they want to buy some high-end accessories. Joshua awkwardly declines, but Lodi realizes this is the perfect chance to bribe him with a gift so he'll stop being mad at her dad. She picks up a shiny ring, wondering if the terrifying Duke of the North would actually wear something like this. Joshua completely ignores her dad's fashion choices and asks where his gift is. Lodi teases him for wanting her to buy him a gift, but he smoothly tells her to just pick one out for herself too. She points out a massive, gorgeous jewel-encrusted brooch. Joshua smiles, totally approving of her expensive taste. Suddenly, a huge commotion breaks out, and Lodi realizes the royal family is parading through the streets. The crowd parts as the prince makes a grand ceremonial entrance into the capital on horseback. Lodi excitedly calls for Joshua to come look at the royal parade. But Joshua completely freezes, his eyes locking onto the familiar crest displayed on the knight's flags. A dark memory violently hits him, pulling him back to a brutal day in his past. In the flashback, a group of shadowy figures wearing that exact same crest ruthlessly attacked him to harvest his dragon heart. Snapping back to reality, Lodi notices he looks completely sick and asks if the massive crowd is making him uncomfortable. He forces an apology, sweating nervously as he suggests they get out of there. Lodi turns around, deeply concerned about what triggered his sudden panic attack. Meanwhile, up in the parade, Prince Bihan complains to his aide about the Emperor sending the secretive Fourth Knight's order to escort him. The aide gently reminds him that the Emperor just treasures him, and this elite squad will eventually be under his direct command. Bihan sighs, feeling overwhelmed by the massive responsibilities. Back down in the chaotic crowd, Lodi gets violently shoved. She complains that she's literally going to get crushed to death, but when she calls out for Joshua, she gets no answer. Suddenly, her magical disguise ribbon slips off, completely breaking the spell and reverting her hair back to black. Now completely lost and exposed, she frantically dashes through the dense crowd screaming for Joshua. She bumps into a terrifying man in a dark cloak who immediately gives her the absolute worst vibes. The creepy figure grabs her arm like a vice, sinisterly laughing that they finally caught Duke Damien's daughter completely alone. A creepy stranger grabs Lodi by the arm in a dark alley, and she screams for him to let go. She instantly senses a chilling, unsettling aura radiating off the men. Her eyes widen as she realizes these cloaked creeps are actually demons. They try to drag her away, completely ignoring her threats about her powerful dad coming after them. Lodi is absolutely terrified, but she's also getting super angry. She's completely tired of always playing the helpless princess waiting to be rescued. Suddenly, a massive, glowing magic circle erupts right behind the kidnappers. The demons totally freeze, wondering who just triggered a high-level spell in the middle of the city. Stepping out of the portal like an absolute boss is Bihan, who is supposed to be miles away at the academy. He reveals the bracelet he gave Lodi wasn't just a tracker, it was a literal teleportation anchor. He casually adjusts his sleeve, acting cool, but he's secretly furious that she was put in danger. Seeing Lodi bruised and crying on the ground completely shatters his composure. He gently asks if she can stand, and she nods, incredibly relieved to see him. But as she tries to get up, he immediately notices she's hurt. Her ankle is completely swollen from being roughed up by the kidnappers. Bihan turns to the demons, finally recognizing who these cloaked losers actually are. Without hesitating, he launches a brutal kick, sending one of the traitors flying like a sack of potatoes. The other demons panic, calling him a bastard for suddenly turning on them. But Bihan's patience is completely zeroed out as he steps right on the fallen demon. His eyes turn icy cold as he promises absolute payback for hurting his little sister. He turns back to Lodi, asking for her name so they can team up and unleash some serious power. But before she can answer, Lodi feels a strange magic taking over her lips. A mysterious voice echoes in her mind, telling her not to panic and just let it guide her words. Her instinct kicks in, and she tightly clenches the glowing messenger stone in her hand. She screams the name Phoenix, and a gigantic blazing firebird erupts right into the alley. The massive spell drains her, and Lodi immediately feels like she's going to pass out. The fire spirit tells her that she can't fully control it yet, but it's going to lend her a quick burst of power. Behan catches her as she stumbles, realizing she somehow summoned a literal ancient spirit. The lead demon is absolutely shook, realizing Lodi's insane magical affinity proves she really is the Duke's biological daughter. They start talking trash about the Frodium family, pushing Behen completely over the edge. He fiercely steps in front of Lodi, vowing to destroy anyone who threatens their family. Lodi watches him step up and decides to back him up with her new magical partner. The massive phoenix blazes behind them, ready to turn these demons into literal ash. The spirit tells Lodi to close her eyes and rest, promising to handle the garbage for her. In a blinding flash, the phoenix unleashes a massive wave of hellfire. After the chaos, Behan scratches his head, realizing they need to escape before they draw a crowd. The alley fills with confused villagers, but Lodi is so tiny they totally miss her in the smoke. Behan grabs her hand, relieved she's safe but knowing they have to move fast. They slip away, spotting more shady figures lurking around the market. Behan realizes their cover is totally blown and they're definitely being tracked. To throw off the scent, he uses magic to alter his own appearance. He tweaks his look, trying to blend in like a regular noble kid so they don't get recognized. He wonders why these demons are suddenly so obsessed with hunting down noble children. But he shelves the thought, deciding their main priority is just ditching these creeps. He notices the pursuers aren't wearing official night crests, meaning this is an illegal hit squad. A cold sweat drops down his face as he realizes they're definitely hunting Lodi. Behen quickly pulls Lodi away from the burning bodies of the demons, panting heavily. He checks on her, telling her she needs to stop using so much magic before she hurts herself. The massive firebird shrinks down and Lodi's hair shifts back to black as the spell finally wears off. A tiny, adorable fireball spirit floats around her as Lodi points to Behan, asking her new magical partner who the heck he actually is. Lodi lays in bed, overthinking her recent actions and wondering if she messed up by acting purely out of responsibility. Later, she spots the Duke in the hallway and cheerfully calls out to him. But he literally just turns his back and walks away, vaguely claiming he's busy. Lodi and Veronica stare in pure confusion as her dad completely dodges her without a second glance. Refusing to let it slide, Veronica marches right up to the Duke and demands to know why he's been avoiding the little lady. The Duke looks totally caught off guard, definitely not expecting his aide to confront him so bluntly. Veronica reminds him that she works for Lodi, pointing out how sweet and kind he's been to the young princess. She notes that his sudden mood flip is giving Lodi serious whiplash, and she wants answers. The story shifts to a heavy conversation where the Duke asks Veronica how many human deaths she's seen. Veronica solemnly admits she's watched a lot of close friends and loved ones pass away. The Duke points out that a human's tiny lifespan is basically just a blink of an eye for an immortal demon. Veronica quickly connects the dots, realizing he's pulling away because he's terrified of the brutal pain he'll feel when Lodi eventually dies. He confesses he's only known his daughter for a short time, but he's already insanely attached to her. He knows that spending the rest of her short life together will absolutely wreck him when her time finally comes. Veronica completely understands his fear but hits him with some brutal, necessary honesty. She tells him that the fact he's already agonizing over this means he's in way too deep to distance himself now. She advises him to treasure Lodi as much as possible, building happy memories to buffer the eventual heartbreak. She drops the ultimate reality check, warning the Duke that if he keeps pushing his daughter away, he'll end up regretting his cowardice forever. Snapping back to Lodi, the maids are stressing out because she is sulking heavily on her head maid's day off. They gently suggest taking a stroll through the garden to lift the little princess's spirits. Lodi heads outside, a little embarrassed that her gloomy mood is so incredibly obvious to everyone. She reaches out to touch a blooming rose, remembering this beautiful garden was a special gift from her dad. Suddenly, a wave of sadness hits her and she completely tears up. The maids quickly rush over, assuring her that His Grace is just swamped with work and still treasures her immensely. Trying to cheer her up, they offer to grab her anything she wants from the local village. Since she's cooped up in the mansion, they happily volunteer to be her personal delivery service. Lodi clutches her chest, super touched by how much the staff genuinely cares about her well-being now. Later that day, Lodi wanders the halls and finally spots the man she's been looking for. She completely dashes over like a track star as the maids politely greet the Duke. In a brief flashback, Lodi remembers checking her own symptoms, knowing the original novel predicted her early, tragic death. She figures if she's really destined to die soon, she should be showing some serious warning signs by now. The doctor checks her pulse and she anxiously waits for the verdict. He confirms she's in perfect health and Lodi beams with pure relief. The doctor politely excuses himself and takes his leave. But Lodi still feels uneasy, noticing he was acting a bit cold. She confronts him again, demanding to know if he's absolutely sure she's fine. She nervously gulps, pressing him to point out literally any small issue. The doctor mentions she has some cold energy and poor circulation, and Lodi instantly panics, asking if it means she'll drop dead in 5 years. The doctor totally loses it and bursts out laughing, telling her she's worrying way too much over nothing. Back in the present, Lodi marches right up to her dad. She grabs a handful of his coat with her tiny hands, refusing to let him run away this time. The Duke asks what brings her here, and she bluntly states she just wanted to see him. She points out he's been avoiding her all this time and demands to know if he has something to say. He tries to play dumb, but Lodi cuts right through his act, calling him out for dodging her like the plague. He goes totally silent, realizing he can't hide his massive anxiety from her. Since he doesn't deny the tension, she demands a straight answer right now. Her little hands tightly clench his jacket as tears prick her eyes. With her voice breaking, she asks the heartbreaking question, does he hate her now? The Duke's expression shatters, and he finally drops the tough guy act, admitting he's just a massive coward terrified of facing the death of someone he loves. Without missing a beat, Lodi looks up like an absolute boss and declares that if he's a coward, she'll just have to be brave enough for the both of them. Veronica urgently tells Duke Damien to take a breath, but he is completely stressed out. She reminds him that the demons only tolerate him right now because she's originally from the Auditus family, and he shouldn't ruin that delicate balance. But Veronica fiercely doubles down, declaring she officially belongs to the Frodium family now, not Auditus. She clenches her fist, warning him that showing hostility could trigger the demons into threatening the Frodiums even more. The Duke lets out a heavy sigh, admitting she's totally right and he just misspoke out of pure panic. Getting back to business, he explains to Behan that he still has no clue how the kidnapping actually happened. He reveals he gave Lodi a magical SOS bracelet, but by the time it shattered and summoned him, she was already gone. Behan nods solemnly, noting that he even found the burnt-out magic tool left behind on the floor. When the Duke asks for a body count, Behan confirms there were 4 attackers, but one barely survived with massive injuries. Based on the demon's chatter, Behan suspects there's a whole squad of them out there, prompting him to call in extra security. The Duke looks dead serious, ordering his men to pull up the logs for the demonic world's gate immediately. Suddenly, a guard announces that Marquis Cyrus just pulled up to the estate. Cyrus strolls in, mentioning he contacted the security team the second he heard the news. The Duke completely brushes him off, stating he already handled it personally. Cyrus sighs, admitting he thought this emergency meeting was about a different recent incident. The Duke drops a massive truth bomb, revealing several unidentified corpses from Cyrus's world were just found dumped in an alley. Cyrus completely groans, realizing his people are stirring up major trouble. He admits he knows demons have been sneaking into the Empire under his watch. The Duke glares at him, making it crystal clear that even though no civilians got hurt, this breach is a massive deal. Sweating a little, Cyrus promises to tighten security and mentions he already bribed the patrols to keep their mouths shut. After a bit of petty bickering, Cyrus realizes he's overstayed his welcome and formally excuses himself. As he leaves, the entire mansion is smothered in a heavy, gloomy vibe. Behan watches his adoptive father, noticing the Duke looks like he hasn't slept or eaten in days. The kid looks up at the massive estate, wondering if all this dark energy is tied to the young princess's trauma. Meanwhile, Lodi wakes up in her giant bed, stretching her arms and finally feeling a bit better. The trauma of the kidnapping is slowly fading as she gets her energy back. Out of nowhere, a literal giant bird of fire erupts in her room, sassily telling her it took her long enough to call for him. Lodi smiles, completely unfazed, and genuinely thanks the phoenix for saving her life like a total boss. The fiery spirit laughs it off, claiming he feels amazing now that he's finally busted out of that tiny stone. When Lodi asks what it's like being trapped inside, the phoenix explains it cuts him off from nature entirely. Lodi tilts her head, wondering how a legendary beast got jammed into a shiny rock in the first place. He explains that when humans lost their spirit affinity, spiritualists started kidnapping spirits and sealing them into stones to preserve their dying magic. Lodi listens closely, realizing the phoenix has absolutely no idea if this is tied to the missing demons. The phoenix scoffs, calling his previous partners total idiots for only caring about his power level before stuffing him in a rock. Lodi completely relates, remembering how awful it felt to be trapped and isolated in the past. The blazing bird puffs out his chest, telling her she should be the one taking a bow for finally setting him free. Lodi just stares at him in awe, totally mesmerized by his grand and confident vibe. She realizes he's basically posing and just wants her to tell him how awesome he is. The phoenix strikes a heroic pose, fully expecting some top-tier praise from his new master. But suddenly, a loud knock echoes through the door, making Lodi's sweat drop. She totally panics, shouting at the giant firebird to get back into his rock before Veronica catches them. Veronica steps inside, totally confused by the loud clatter, and asks if Lodi just fell out of bed like a goofball. Lodi nervously laughs, lying that she was just trying to dig something out of her blankets. Veronica hands her a warm drink and Lodi takes a sip, feeling completely refreshed. Veronica smiles softly, glad to see the young lady finally looking more awake. She grabs a brush and starts gently combing through Lodi's tangled hair. With a serious tone, Veronica warns her that if another supernatural attack happens, normal human maids will be totally useless to stop it. Because Lodi's ankle is still completely wrecked from the kidnapping, Veronica just scoops her up to carry her around. Safely tucked back into bed, Lodi looks up and is totally surprised to see Bihan walking into her room. She asks why he's back so early, and he casually smiles, revealing he skipped out on the rest of the academy term just to come home to her. The Duke's aide confirms that Lodi spent her entire day hanging out with Joshua. Veronica smirks, calling the Duke out for secretly checking up on his daughter even though he's intentionally distancing himself. She smiles to herself, totally confident that his stubborn tough guy act won't last much longer. The next morning, Lodi wakes up to the sound of maids buzzing excitedly about a massive farmer's market. Still upset about her dad ignoring her, she feels a pang of sadness that everyone seems so happy without her. But then she notices a heavy coat draped over her bed. It's her dad's jacket. He must have secretly checked on her during the night. She grumbles, thinking her cowardly dad better apologize to her soon. Stepping out of bed, she admits that even though her dream wasn't a nightmare, she still feels super down in the dumps. The maids keep chatting about how the epic village market officially opens today. Lodi's eyes light up as she realizes her dream was actually a vision of this exact festival. She quietly wishes she could go too, when suddenly a familiar voice calls out her name. It's Joshua, he grins, proudly announcing that he finally found her. He teases her for oversleeping, calling her a total lazy bum, which makes Lodi aggressively pout. Spotting the oversized coat, Joshua assumes she finally made up with the Duke, but Lodi sadly admits they're still not talking. Hoping to end their little Cold War, Lodi leaves an apology letter on her desk for her dad to find. Joshua gets straight to business, saying he needs her help with something. Lodi invites him into her room, apologizing if she kept him waiting too long. He shakes his head, staring at her intensely before she asks what's up. She pulls out her magical communication stone and asks him to take a look at it. Joshua examines it and explains that the stone is completely drained of magic. Lodi asks if she needs to buy a new one, but Joshua casually offers to just recharge it for her. Lodi is absolutely baffled, pointing out that the estate's massive anti-magic barrier should make that impossible. Joshua smirks like an absolute boss, flexing his hand as pure mana swirls around him. He totally bypasses the system, revealing he secretly hacked the estate's barrier so he could freely cast spells inside. Lodi is mind-blown by how easy he made it look, but Joshua admits he had to sweat a little to pull off the crazy bypass. Changing the subject, Joshua notices the buzzing energy around the mansion. Lodi explains that the maids are super hyped about the massive farmers market happening in the capital today. Joshua asks if she heard about it from the staff, and Lodi admits she actually saw it in her dream. Joshua hypes it up, talking about all the insane street food, rare items, and epic fireworks they usually have. Seeing Lodi's eyes practically shining, Joshua bluntly suggests they just sneak out and go see it. Lodi wants to ask for permission, but Joshua points out her overprotective dad will just send guards to tail them. He complains that having a security detail totally ruins the vibe. Lodi hesitates, completely terrified of getting in trouble if they get caught sneaking around. Joshua smirks, asking if she's seriously underestimating his skills to bypass the Frodium security. Extending his hand like a prince, he confidently promises that his magic is way too overpowered for them to get caught. Lodi thinks about how her dad has been ignoring her anyway, and she desperately doesn't want to be left alone again. Making a split-second decision, she grabs his hand and agrees to go wild just this once. With a flash of magic, they instantly teleport, though the dizzying warp makes Lodi stumble. They land in a super creepy, dark alleyway, and Joshua explains he couldn't just spawn them in the middle of a crowded street. They step out of the shadows, ready to explore the massive festival. To blend in, Joshua casts a spell to completely alter his own appearance. He ages himself up into a teenager so no one recognizes him as the famous Marquis Cyrus. but his heightened senses immediately detect shady figures tailing them. He decides he needs to get rid of these creeps before they ruin the trip. He notices the pursuers aren't wearing official night crests, meaning they're an illegal hit squad. A cold sweat drops down his face as he realizes they aren't hunting him, they're definitely after Lodi. Meanwhile, back in the chaotic crowd, Lodi's magical disguise ribbon completely snaps. Now completely lost and separated from Joshua, she frantically dashes through the dense crowd calling his name. She bumps into a terrifying cloaked figure who immediately gives her the absolute worst vibes. The demonic hitman grabs her by the arm, sinisterly laughing that they finally caught Duke Damien's daughter completely unprotected. Veronica reviews the suspect list, completely baffled that every single alibi actually checks out. She explains that 8 of the demons were recorded crossing the gates, but somehow never officially stepped foot into the Empire. Duke Damien sits back, his eyes narrowing as he processes the massive security breach. Veronica deduces that since the demons lost their passes at totally different times, someone must be intentionally collecting them. She confirms there's literally zero connection between the demons involved. Damien realizes tracking down the actual ringleader is going to be a massive headache. Still, he already has a few high-profile suspects in mind and dismisses Veronica to handle the rest. Later, looking down at a sleeping Lodi, Damien stresses that the holy water barely healed her injuries at all. He stares softly at her, realizing he doesn't even care if he looks foolish anymore, he just wants her safe. Promising to be right back, he leaves her room to finally take out the trash. Meanwhile, a sketchy mustache guy is absolutely fuming that his hit squad failed their mission. He complains that saving those useless idiots was a total waste of time if the whole kidnapping scheme flopped. A pink-haired demon noble casually fans herself, asking what all the drama is about. Another noble explains that Mustache Man tried to use some abandoned toys to pull off his master plan. The lady raises an eyebrow, asking what he was actually trying to achieve. Mustache Man admits he hired the goons to kidnap the traitor's daughter, totally baffled that they failed even with smuggled magic tools. When asked how he even got those illegal items into the Empire, he smirks and brags about his underground connections. The other nobles tell him to chill, pointing out that at least his plan successfully provoked the Duke. Looking down at the courtyard, they spot Bihan training and casually discuss who owns the minion. Mustache Man complains he should have snatched the gray-haired kid before Frodium got to him. He bitterly resents that Damien stole the best fighter, admitting he totally wanted Bihan for himself. Suddenly, the pink-haired noble snaps her fan shut, irritated by a loud, vulgar noise outside the room. She orders an attendant to go see what the commotion is. But before anyone can move, a cold voice declares that they are the ones sitting around acting completely useless. The lady grits her teeth, warning Damien that she officially outranks him. Damien just casually strolls in, challenging her to a fight in the courtyard if she really wants to test that theory. The nobles mock him for acting arrogant, but Damien's eyes glow red as he states he's been way too nice for too long. They accuse him of getting a big head just because he controls the dimensional gate. Damien completely bodies them with pure logic, stating that in the demon world, the weak just have to obey the strong. His terrifying aura flares up, completely suffocating the room as he asks why they're trying so hard to provoke him. The floor literally cracks under his heavy pressure as the nobles realize they messed up. Damien coldly commands them to pass a message directly to their ringleader. He drops a battered, bleeding demon right at their feet like a sack of garbage. He warns them that getting his hands bloody is just standard demon procedure, and this is only a tiny taste of his revenge. Back at the estate, Lodi watches her dad intensely scrub his hands, telling him not to stress over the idiot demons. Damien sighs, refusing to hug her while his hands still feel stained with blood. Once he's completely clean, he finally scoops her up for a warm hug just as a knock interrupts them. Bihan steps in, announcing that the custom item from the craftsman has finally arrived. It's a gorgeous custom-built wheelchair. Damien explains that while it's not perfect, it'll at least let her move around her room while her ankle heals up. Lodi beams, joking that her dad and Veronica won't have to carry her everywhere anymore. But both Damien and Veronica instantly chime in, saying they actually love carrying her around. Damien notices the tiny bird on Lodi's shoulder and asks Bihan if summoning it takes a toll on her body. Lodi defends her new partner, insisting that keeping the phoenix in a mini form takes zero effort. But the little bird instantly snitches on her, completely wrecking her argument before Lodi angrily tells it to shut up. Veronica smoothly changes the subject, letting Lodi know they finished inspecting her communication stone. Lodi nervously asks if they found anything suspicious during the sweep. Veronica assures her everything is clean, totally misunderstanding Lodi's sudden anxiety. Lodi lets out a massive internal sigh of relief, realizing Joshua perfectly covered his tracks when he hacked the magical barrier. Finally left alone on the sofa, Lodi breathes out, glad she can just relax without everyone hovering over her for a minute. Lodi holds her magical communication stone, pouting as she asks Joshua why he hasn't hit her up sooner. She waits for a response, completely annoyed by the radio silence. But suddenly it's not Joshua who picks up, it's his mom, Marchioness Cyrus. The Marchioness looks totally anxious, explaining that the Duke is keeping secrets and Joshua couldn't reach her at all. Lodi quickly reassures her, confidently declaring that her injuries are fully healed and she is perfectly fine. Then the Marchioness casually drops an absolute bombshell: Joshua already left for the academy. Lodi looks down, completely bummed out that he dipped without a proper goodbye. The Marchioness gives her an encouraging smile, telling her she knows she'll stay strong despite the sad news. Trying to distract herself, Lodi switches gears and asks about the mysterious book she was assigned to read. The ancient text is all about the legendary elementalers. It turns out the book is basically a relic from a forgotten era of elves. It reveals a dark truth. As spirits began to fade from nature, spiritualists desperately started trapping them inside stones just to survive. Later, Lodi is chilling outside when Bihan approaches her holding a massive bouquet of pink roses. She casually mentions the crazy incident where her dad literally burned his hand just touching holy water. She points out that because of his demonic nature, there's absolutely no way he can take her to the holy temple for healing. Sitting in her wheelchair, she looks a little defeated as Bihan listens closely. Without hesitating, Bihan suggests that he should take her to the temple instead. He beams with a bright smile, giving full credit to Joshua for coming up with the brilliant master plan. He proposes that the three of them make the trip together like an ultimate squad. Lodi's eyes sparkle with pure excitement, ready to beg her dad for permission. She looks out over the estate, hoping this crazy plan actually gets the green light. Cut to the Marchioness, who steps up like an absolute boss to ask the terrifying Duke for official permission to take Lodi. Meanwhile, back in her room, Lodi hugs a pillow and asks Veronica what a temple actually is. Veronica smiles warmly, explaining it's a sacred place where people go to pray to the gods. Lodi tilts her head, wondering why anyone would bother going all the way there just to pray. Veronica clarifies that the priests there actually use divine power to heal the sick. Suddenly, all the puzzle pieces click in Lodi's brain: demons and divine magic mix like oil and water. She realizes that holy energy is basically literal poison to demons, making the temple a complete no-go zone for them. It finally makes sense why her overpowered dad couldn't just walk in and demand healing for her. Her heart aches for him, realizing his demonic blood totally blocked him from saving his own daughter. She slumps down, admitting that for the first time ever, she absolutely hates being a demon. She cries, explaining that if she were human, she could just walk herself to the temple without causing all this drama. Veronica looks at her with soft, loving eyes, completely melting at Lodi's pure heart. Lodi leans into her, wishing Veronica never had to experience any pain or worry on her behalf. Veronica playfully squishes Lodi's chubby cheeks, reassuring her that just seeing her safe totally healed all her worries.